they share with the deities, it feels more like a passage. Seeing Nightingale lost in thought, Roland quickly realizes what she's considering, and scolds her for even thinking about it. Apparently, she wanted to turn herself into a divine punishment witch and enter the dream world. But Roland won't let her do that. Entering the dream world doesn't mean someone enters his consciousness. It also doesn't mean they'll exist forever. It's just a strange, artificial world, corrupted by unknown power, and there's a chance it might cease to exist one day. He might dream every night, but he's not sure sacrificing one's senses to live in a shell for the rest of their life is worth it. Nightingale seems jealous of the others who've been able to visit this strange place inside and wants to experience it too. But Roland reminds her that those girls have sacrificed a lot to get there. Living without senses is more terrifying than being trapped in an invisible cage in the dream world. Also, since Nightingale is always there to protect him, he doesn't want a divine judgment warrior with a prickly beard being in charge of his safety. After all, he's grown fond of looking at her big assets. Of course, Nightingale gets flustered and twirls around to hide her embarrassed face. To lift her spirits, Roland decides to have some drinks and dry fish, a little thank you for her efforts. As they enjoy themselves, he tries to make her realize that she's just as important as Anna in their fight against their enemies. They each shine in their respective fields. She then questions him about the dream world, mentioning that he said the world had been affected by some unknown power. While Roland has a lot to say about it, he sums everything up by assuring her that anything happening inside that world won't affect him in the real world. As long as he chooses not to dream, the light pillars won't appear. As for the unknown power, Garcia said the Martialist Association would uncover the mysteries with their new recruits. Roland doesn't know exactly what she meant by that, but he hopes to figure it out soon. Compared to the corrosion, he's more worried about that math textbook that suddenly had new content in it. It's actually a sign that something has changed. When he first entered the dream world, he was certain that any book he hadn't read appeared with blank pages in his dream. He concluded that the book titles only appeared because he had seen their covers before. Since he didn't know the contents, he assumed that was why the books were empty. But then he found out that the math textbook on Zero's desk proved him wrong. The book had content, even though he'd never studied it. He wonders if he just missed it at first, or if something has changed recently that caused this development. If it's the latter, things have just gotten a lot more interesting. If the math textbook can generate content on its own, the same might be true for other books he hasn't read in his previous life. Gaining strange powers, exterminating fallen evils, and unleashing the power of nature, he is sure there's a connection he needs to figure out. While he's lost in thought, Nightingale pulls him back to reality by calling his name. It turns out he had been squeezing her thighs while deep in thought, and now she is taking it the wrong way. Just then, someone knocks on the door, causing Nightingale to retreat back into her mist, sparing Roland the trouble of explaining himself. It's Agatha, here to report that all samples from the snowy mountains have been transported to the third border city. She asks if he would like to check them. Roland, eager to see the samples, decides to accompany her. She suddenly notices Roland's awkward voice and startled face, making her wonder if he's sick. Of course, Roland quickly tries to convince her otherwise. Still, she insists that he visit Lily for a thorough checkup before proceeding. Nightingale teases him from under her mist, causing the poor guy even more embarrassment. Finally, they arrive in the third border town, where Phyllis and her companions have been waiting for their king's arrival. Once inside, Roland faces the annoyance of Alethea, who's upset about his plan. Apparently, Roland wants to breed mutated bugs they captured from the mountains right here in the town. Even Pasha seems against this idea. His curiosity to research these deep-sea enemies might end in disaster. Well, this is exactly why Roland is conducting his experiment here, so the tequila witches can guard them. The bugs that have been captured aren't hostile at all, and they have no idea how to burrow through the rocks. All she needs is one chamber to keep them under control. According to Agatha's observations, these bugs don't have a sense of self. They only feed and breed. Maybe that multi-eyed monster was able to control them in some way. So, if a creature like this were hostile enough, it may have already reached Neverwinter City, and had caused a lot of trouble. Pasha apologizes to Roland on behalf of Alethea for her initial outburst. She was just worried that these bugs might be harmful to Neverwinter. Roland understands Alethea's concerns, but he can't ignore what Agatha and Lightning wrote in the report. According to the report, killing all the bugs just because of a small possibility of danger would be overdoing it. Keeping them underneath the mountains is already a secure enough plan. Roland then decides to take a look at these creatures. After walking for a short time, they finally arrive at the designated location. There, they see giant mushrooms. It's actually a nursery that Fulin set up. There's only one entrance, and the water comes from the rocks, so there aren't any nooks or crannies left for the bugs to get out of here. Agatha points out that these huge mushrooms will serve as a food source for the mutated bugs. If they can thrive here, they'll only have to put in a little effort to harvest lots of mutated bugs. Roland starts weighing his options. If he can't transplant the mushrooms, they'll have to get Lily to cultivate them. It's a pity the mushrooms growing in the ruins are poisonous and inedible. Otherwise, they'd make a great substitute for meat when it comes to protein intake. Phyllis is curious to know why Roland wants to grow so many bugs. After all, a handful of bugs would suffice if he only intends to experiment on them. Well, it looks like Roland has bigger plans that could potentially help with the development of Neverwinter. Agatha then uses her magic to take one of the bugs down. After killing it, she tears open the belly of the monster, and out comes this sticky, cum-like substance. This sticky fluid can be used as a perspective, and it stays liquid most of the time. But this sticky stuff isn't the highlight of the show. She tears open the monster further and pulls out this green stuff that seems like a gallbladder. The difference is this doesn't contain bile. As soon as she tears open the gallbladder and mixes the green liquid with the sticky white stuff, the mixture solidifies right away. It turns into a gummy, non-sticky, bouncy substance. Basically, it's natural rubber. Roland is also glad at this discovery. They've had people searching for rubber plants all this time, but they didn't find anything even remotely close to rubber. So, all this time, he had been relying on Soraya for any elastic material. Just as he had thought, there were no rubber plants on this land, but the ruins gave him a pleasant surprise. That's why he's willing to risk trying to cultivate these mutated creatures from the deep sea. Pasha finally understands the significance of this stuff. She's sure it can easily be used for making fishnets and ropes. Alethea, however, doesn't agree because this stuff is too bouncy to act like a rope. Nobody likes pulling on ropes that just keep stretching. While this stuff could be used for fishnets, Alethea is pretty sure Roland would never risk bringing these unknown bugs to Neverwinter just to make fishnets. Right now, she has no clue what crazy idea the Majesty is cooking up, but she's sure it's something much more significant. Roland is rather surprised to see Alethea not acting like arrogant bitch for once. She always had a problem with him, but this time she chooses to appreciate him. He then assures her that she'll be able to witness rubber's significance soon enough. Pasha then questions how they're going to make these creatures spit out the fluid themselves, as killing them each time would be very inefficient. Agatha isn't worried about this at the moment. If they don't find an optimal solution, they can just cultivate more of them to make up the numbers. After their little visit to the bug cultivation farm, they head back. Pasha introduces Jasmine and Lyra, who have volunteered to become devouring worms. However, they have this wish to experience the beautiful world Roland has spoken of, the one that exists in his dreams. Roland is more than happy to let them experience it. 2 days later, we see the steel warship cruising through the waters. This ship actually carries a relic that can help transfer souls, and Jasmine and Lyra will become devouring worms once the soldiers ship this relic to the third border town city. Counting Jasmine and Lyra, Neverwinter City will have 3 devouring worm vessels. Not only will this bolster their overall power, but it will also help speed up their development. We then get a glimpse of a few days earlier, when Jasmine and Lyra had fun in Roland's dream world. Seeing them so happy really made Roland happy as well. If it weren't for the tequila witches, he would have refused to believe that anybody would be willing to give up their human bodies and dedicate their lives to defeating the devils. 400 years ago, these girls made this exact decision in front of the magic core. It's not that they desired to have their senses stripped for eternity, it's that they had no choice, and they don't regret it either. Suddenly, Phyllis arrives at the dock. Roland questions her, asking if witches can't disconnect themselves once they possess a vessel. Just like Jasmine and Lyra, would they be able to disconnect themselves from the devouring worms? Phyllis explains that divine punishment witches are different from vessels. Witches can still maintain their consciousness to a certain degree, even after their souls have been transferred. Rather than fusing with the vessel, it's more like the witches are the manipulators. However, vessels are different. They are containers. Once you force a connection with one, you can go into hibernation when the vessel is not in use, but nobody has ever successfully separated themselves from the vessel entirely. At least Pasha and others failed to do so. Roland wants her to confirm. Even if they are inside vessels, they still have the pillars of light? Phyllis confirms it. After all, without magic, it would be impossible to move those huge bodies. Roland is sure that one day he will find a way to bring them back to the dream world. Phyllis is also hoping that day arrives soon. We then cut to this warship. On board is Lorgar, and it's her first time riding such a massive and advanced ship. Later, she meets Andrea on the ship and questions him about how this ship is even moving without any wind. Andrea then briefs the curious girl with all the juicy details about steam engines and how they work. And the one who is backing all this advanced technology is Anna. These modern weapons are so powerful that even an ordinary human gave Ash a run for her money. That ordinary human, who was Knight Carter in this case, was equipped with a weapon Anna created. Basically, Lorgar could further harness her potential if she requests Roland to make a personalized weapon for her. Andrea is sure that with those giant machine guns strapped over her back once she's in monstrous form, she could be a force to be reckoned with. It seems like Lorgar is not ready for it yet. But still, she decides to keep this possibility in mind as well. After all, her father did say that she should always be open to new things. Suddenly, Maggie arrives in the sky in her pigeon form. Lorgar gets excited to see such a potential snack heading right her way. But that snack zips right past her and heads to Ash. Once Maggie is done exchanging information, she flies back to Tilly. Ash then briefs the curious girl that the bird they just saw was Maggie, who is capable of transforming just like her. Lorgar acknowledges this, though it doesn't make sense why Maggie is looking like a cute pigeon when she was supposed to be a furious devil. Ash then tells Lorgar to get ready because they're about to reach Neverwinter City soon enough. Finally, they arrive at Neverwinter City. There are folks on the dock who salute Ash and her crew out of respect. Since Lorgar has never seen this kind of greeting, Ash explains to her that it's a military salute. And whenever the First Army ships arrive at the dock after their expeditions, they always salute like this. To them, it means their family has returned safely. All members of the army are from Neverwinter. This means most citizens here would have had somebody in their family join the army, though nobody is forced to join. In fact, becoming a soldier and serving Roland is seen as an ambitious and glorious endeavor. They're just happy that other people's sons and daughters are returning. In return, other people do the same. They basically cheer for each other to keep the positive vibe going. Inherently, this is what the People's Army truly means. Well, it looks like Lorgar is liking the ways of Neverwinter City so far. They finally make it to the castle. Lorgar takes note of how the entire area has already been cleared of the snow. A divine punishment witch steps forward to escort Lorgar to Roland. As the wolf girl follows her escort, she feels very nervous. Eventually, she finally comes across the chief of this place, the one who flipped the southernmost region upside down. Of course, she wasn't expecting Roland to look this ordinary and young. Before she realizes it, the king himself takes the liberty of walking up to her and introducing himself to this wise wolf. Lorgar, of course, has no clue what all this wise wolf talk is about. She thinks perhaps there are unwise wolves as well. Anyhow, she introduces herself as Lorgar Burnflame. Since they're in Neverwinter City, calling her a witch will be more befitting. She also pays respects on behalf of her father. While she is going through her own inner turmoil, with all sorts of questions and realizations bubbling up inside her, Roland takes note of her tail and ears. He is quite fascinated, to say the least, and wants to know if she keeps her tail and ears by pouring continuous magic into them, or if they are part of her body. She finally satisfies his curiosity by revealing that she can't make them disappear. She knows how weird and creepy they look, but they're now part of her body. The only thing she can do is stay away from the public eye to avoid scaring anyone. She then reflects on how the title of goddess is seen as a symbol of power and beauty by the Sand People. Anyone with this title is worshipped by every clan and admired by all young warriors. Yet she had always been the exception. Roland, meanwhile, isn't sure why she would want to hide from the public's eye. She might see them as a flaw in her body, but it's more like a unique aspect of her. Not to mention, they're pretty. So pretty, in fact, that he wants to feel them with his own hands. Either way, he would never ask her to hide them in any way. She can do whatever she's comfortable with. In order to normalize her appearance, he can just have Sroya draw some comics about her. She could even join the Starflower troupe and do stage performances. After all, becoming a celebrity is the best way to make the public aware of her. Of course, Lorgar has no idea what this stage performance jargon is all about. But that's for later. Roland wants her to confirm if she's here to contribute to the upcoming divine war and fight devils. Lorgar responds positively. Not only that, she also came here to further improve her skills. She has heard about a witch called Miss Nana in Neverwinter City, who is capable of healing any injured witch. To a warrior, she's extremely important. Being able to fight without worrying about injuries is something every warrior dreams of. Roland acknowledges her fighting spirit and assures her that once she signs up for the Witch Union, she'll have plenty of chances to fight. Lorgar then wishes to fight alone. She wants to be like a mercenary. Aside from fighting, she doesn't want to be distracted by anything else. Internally, she thinks that she doesn't want to become absolutely loyal to this king without knowing anything about the North. She's from the Sand People. If this king fails to deliver his promises to them, those who migrate here will one day split away from Grey Castle. If that day comes, Grey Castle will become their enemy, and she can't be hasty with her decision. Though Roland rejects her mercenary proposal. This, of course, makes her curious why he's saying that, since mercenaries are highly coveted among the clans. In fact, she's even willing to fight for free. Roland, on the other hand, gives his peace of mind. They are facing a war, so it's much more complicated than little fights among clans. Lorgar feels rather annoyed that this guy treats her fights like nothing more than toddler squabbles. He reminds her how powerful Ash actually is. So powerful, in fact, that she's considered one of the extraordinary fighters. However, there's something even above that. When a witch breaks through the limits of the mortal body, they become stronger and stronger, and nothing can stop them. That's when a witch becomes transcendent. Yet, with 3 transcendents, dozens of extraordinary fighters, and countless battle witches, they still failed to defeat the devils. A huge kingdom once turned to dust. This time, his kingdom will be the one to turn to dust if they don't do something. His reason for saying no is simple. This isn't just a one-on-one battle she can fight. This is a war to decide which civilization survives until the end. No matter how strong an individual is, individual power is insignificant in war. More importantly, he doesn't want to send her recklessly to her own death. It seems like nothing is going as Lorgar had expected. She had wished to become his mercenary on the condition that she could practice fighting with other witches. She also wanted to receive medical treatment from Miss Anna, but she would pay her own bills. She had been sure that this plan would work, and then Roland would assign her mercenary tasks to carry out. She would diligently take down her opponents. But what happened now is the exact opposite of what she thought. Hell, he even likes her and complimented her ears just now. It's very unusual for her to be considered pretty. Anyhow, she can say no to his proposition, but she's not losing much even if she accepts his terms. Her original plan was to learn new things about this city, find out more about the devils, and align with other witches. And she can still do that, albeit at a slower pace. He's also right about one thing. One shouldn't rush into things without knowing the full danger. As she walks through the town, she considers all the possibilities and how thoughtful Roland is with each step. This makes her even more confident about his plans and ambitions. She suddenly stumbles across a pub selling turbulent drinks, and newcomers can get a 50% discount on their first drink. By the way, these were called turbulent drinks in previous translations, but now they're being called chaos drinks. Lorgar gets curious when she hears the unusual name for the drinks. We then cut to Nightingale, who reports to Roland about how Lorgar wasn't being completely truthful. She warns him to be cautious around her and even suggests letting Wendy test her out. But the Majesty feels that keeping an eye on her is only necessary if she joins the Union. Since she hasn't applied yet, there's no need for concern. Plus, Lorgar definitely came to Neverwinter City to fight the devils and improve herself. That alone is reason enough to trust her. The Witch Union was formed to give lost witches a sense of belonging. There's no point in forcing someone to join if they're not ready. Not to mention she's new to this foreign city, so it's natural for her to be cautious. Roland decides to let her be. Though it's a shame she isn't joining right away. The guy's got a serious crush on wolf girls with tails and pointy ears. If only he could have touched them. Even Nightingale can sense his pervy thoughts, so she starts throwing deadly daggers with her sheer glare intensity. Suddenly, there's a knock on the door. In comes Barov. He's here to report that the members of the Joint Chamber of Commerce have just arrived at the castle and want to see the Majesty. The next scene shows Roland entering the guest room, where all the merchants, including Margaret, greet him with utmost respect. They're here to deliver the good news. The sample of chaos drinks they distributed among merchants has instantly gained everyone's approval. Literally, no one is getting tired of praising it. It's only a matter of time before the drinks go on sale and become the most successful product in the fjords. More importantly, it's not just drinks. For instance, that bottle of spicy juice might not quench one's thirst, but it can elevate the taste of your fish and barbecue to a whole other level. Not to mention, it keeps your body warm and your senses sharp. It's even more effective than rice liquor. Those who drink rice liquor can't drive due to dizziness. But that's not an issue with the chaos drink. Adventurers have also taken notice of the chaos drink. After all, it keeps your body warm without any side effects. This drink could very well save their lives in certain situations. Hence, they suggest selling the chaos drink in different price brackets. With such a special item, all it takes is some advertising to bump up the price. Not to mention, the drink is consumed in bottles. Roland isn't surprised at how well the merchants understand the market and handle the product. They only needed some samples to realize this item can be divided into various varieties. To maximize its value, the best approach is to price them differently based on their purposes. In light of this positive feedback, Roland suggests signing the necessary contracts before getting ready to sell the products. He's confident they'll agree with the terms for pricing and distribution. In addition to the terms he's already revealed, he also adds that everyone is required to pay a 30% deposit before receiving the goods. One of the merchants reveals that he's got the gold ready in his cargo ship. With that, Roland decides to visit the drink factory. The merchants follow Roland to the factory, and in the basement, they see dozens of barrels stacked up. Roland reveals that this place can produce 20 barrels of chaos drink every month. The merchants are advised to divide the haul accordingly, with each merchant receiving 5 barrels. It doesn't matter how long it takes for them to sell their share, they'll receive 5 barrels every month, as long as the factory's production goes as planned. It's up to the merchants whether they want to collect their haul every 3 months or every 6 months. For now, 100 barrels are ready to be shipped. One of the merchants inquires if they're allowed to taste the drink. Roland reminds them that this isn't wine that gets better with time. While some chaos drinks can last for a long time, that doesn't apply to all of them. After brewing, the drinks need to be sterilized and sealed. Well, none of the merchants have a clue what sterilization is about. Roland brushes off their confusion, explaining that chaos drinks can spoil like any food. The warmer the climate, the faster they'll go bad, so sterilizing it can counter that problem. They don't need to understand the science behind sterilization, just need to keep in mind that once the barrel is unsealed, the drink won't be at its freshest anymore. They can choose to sell them right away or store them properly. As long as they keep them in a dark place, away from light and humidity, they'll easily last 1 to 2 months. One of the merchants raises a question. Since every barrel is filled with a different kind of drink, some are bound to sell better than others. So how are they supposed to choose the barrels with the highest sales potential? If only Roland could divide every barrel into 4 parts before sealing them, then every merchant would get the same variety of drinks as everyone else. That would level the playing field. Roland considers this option, but after thinking it through, he realizes it would just pile more unnecessary work on Soraya and Lily. It's not like he benefits from doing this. He doesn't care who sells which drink. So he rejects the merchant's proposal. See, sterilizing the drinks isn't easy. If he starts splitting up barrels, each chamber of commerce ends up with fewer stocks, but more variety, which doesn't actually help their sales. And when it comes to flavors, the northern and western regions have completely different preferences when it comes to drinks. The unpopular ones here might do great over there. As merchants who move goods around all the time, they should already know this. Besides, flavor isn't the issue here, it's how you sell it. They should get the most out of each drink and find their own niche. Eventually, he tells them to go ahead and pick whichever chaos drinks they like. As all the merchants start wandering around, trying to grab the best barrels, Roland sneaks up beside Margaret and gives her a little tip. He points out a certain barrel number and tells her those are the most delicious ones. It's a thank you gift. If she hadn't brought those merchants over in the beginning, the West wouldn't have developed so quickly in just 2 or 3 years. He knows she didn't come to Border Town for business at first, but the town still benefited from her efforts. So giving her this little help now is nothing in comparison. Though this is the only time he'll do something like this, if the others catch on, they'll definitely get suspicious. Margaret gladly accepts the offer, and since he's being so generous, she decides to return the favor with a little inside info. She leans in and whispers that one of the merchants she mentioned earlier, her good friend Hogg, is planning to visit the western region soon. But from what she's read in his letter, he won't be coming alone. Turns out the machines my guy had been selling are becoming pretty popular. Pretty much every businessman who owns mines wants to know more about these steam engines and all that stuff. So there's a good chance Roland will need to ramp up production in the next 6 months. Looks like the pieces are finally falling into place. See, if any of the small kingdoms or towns need machinery, they'll have no choice but to buy the raw materials, equipment, and key components from Neverwinter, because they lack their own industrial system. Which means this will seriously benefit Greycastle. It's finally time for Roland to start building even more factories. We cut to Tilly, who's writing a letter to her assistant, Camilla, on Sleeping Island. She reports that the months of demons are finally over, and peace has returned to the western region. The celebration was pretty fun, and townsfolk gathered for hot pot. Roland had broths going in 4 massive metal pots. Then he threw in meat, vegetables, whale chicken, and birdkiss mushrooms. The smell was so good, you could catch a whiff from the other side of the river. He called hot pot a Neverwinter specialty, and no party was complete without it. Tilly writes about all the fascinating stuff happening in Neverwinter and why it feels so good to be living there. She also talks about Ash and Andrea's exploits, like how they successfully conquered the southern region. Right then, Ash shows up in the room. The two share a light, friendly chat before Tilly goes back to writing her letter. According to her promise with Roland, the relocation of witches will happen in spring. Now that the months of demons are over, the merchant routes of the fjords will get busy. It will become hard to hire ships and sailors. If they run into any trouble during relocation, they can count on Thunder for help. He's currently out looking for adventurers interested in exploring the sea line. Tilly also tells her fellow to make sure to inform the leaders and merchants in the fjords where the witches are relocating. Spread the word. The sleeping spell service is still open for everyone. There's no need to worry about witches being too far from the fjords after the move. If anyone needs help, they'll still be able to get the right witch for the job. Tilly has a feeling that the route from the west to the fjords will soon become one of the busiest trade routes. Crossing the straits will become commonplace, especially when the converted paddle steamers at the port are finally complete. She further reminds Camilla of the objective behind their relocation to Neverwinter. It's not because they are abandoning Sleeping Island. Neverwinter City is the first line of defense against the devils. It's also the most dangerous place during the Battle of Divine Will. As humans, they must do their part and fight their enemies with all their might. However, even Roland cannot guarantee that victory will certainly be theirs. When the western region falls into the hands of their enemies, the fjords will be the only place they can take refuge. That being said, Tilly's first wish is that they never fall to their enemies. As long as Sleeping Island is still there, they still have hope. We then learn a bit about Camilla Derry. She was originally a noble of the old royal city. Even though she supports Tilly in her decision, Camilla is still reluctant to abandon Sleeping Island. While Sleeping Island may be important, it doesn't mean they should stay there forever, isolated. Tilly wants to see them experience life like ordinary people. Of course, this letter might not completely convince Camilla, but as more witches understand the western region, Tilly is sure that she'll change her mind. Suddenly Molly arrives. It looks like Molly and a few of the witches are leaving for Sleeping Island, so she's here to ask if Tilly has any letters she wants delivered. Much to Molly's astonishment, there are actually multiple letters, all addressed to one person, Camilla. The energetic girl gladly takes on the task of delivering the letters as told. She finally runs off to board the ships. Tilly watches her fellow witches head to Sleeping Island for good. She feels glad just thinking about how all those witches, who had to abandon their home against their will finally return to their homeland. And thus, a new chapter of their lives will begin. The scene then cuts to one of the apartment buildings, where we see Sister Blade waking up. Once she changes her clothes, she heads downstairs to find her fellow Annie already having breakfast. They chat a little, and from their conversation, we learn that Annie is working in the factories, doing the job that Miss Anna used to be in charge of. After a brief chat, Annie heads off to work, and Blade grabs some warm water to take to Hero. It seems that the legless Hero has finally started to grow her legs back. To understand how this miracle happened, we flash back a month. In the infirmary, Nana grimly revealed that Hero's condition was beyond her scope. She could only repair small injuries, like broken fingers, and that was it. That's when Roland breaks it to her that she's more than capable of doing it with the help of Blade. Once Blade turns into her blade form, Nana takes the dagger in her hands. Just by holding it, Nana can tell that her healing abilities have gotten stronger. She promptly starts applying her magic to Hero's amputated limbs, and miraculously enough, Hero's legs begin to grow back like roots. Though the process is so draining that Nana can only hold it together for less than a minute. That's when the other witches step up to help Nana. Sister Leaf suggests that Hero take some sleeping pills to avoid the unpleasant experience. Since Spear Passy is also present, she can channel the other witch's power into Nana. A few days later, at the clinic, Hero returns for her leg treatment. Nana once again grabs Blade in her hand, just like the other day. Furthermore, Spear Passy helps transfer Sister Leaf's immense magic into Nana. Anna quickly slashes Hero's ungrown part of her legs, and the little girl begins the healing process. An hour goes by, and both Blade and Nana are utterly exhausted. When Hero wakes up from her unconscious state, she finally has new legs. Tears begin streaming down her face as she's overwhelmed by the sight. In the heat of the moment, she hugs Annie. We then cut to Roland, who is reading reports about the success of Hero's surgery. This surgery helped prove that Blade's abilities increase other witches' power limits. For example, Hummingbird has a limit on how long she can keep heavy objects light. Similarly, the same logic applies to Nana. Creating limbs was way beyond her power limit. However, Blade was able to raise this cap. Something impossible was made possible with her presence. Based on Wendy's report, when Blade merges with other witches, those witches can feel their powers getting significantly stronger. So far, Blade has helped Soraya, Agatha, Lucia, and a few other witches harness their powers even better and do wonders. Well, it seems like Blade is going to be the busiest witch in Neverwinter. Suddenly, an officer arrives and reports that Sir Kyle of the chemical industry wants His Majesty to visit Research Lab number 4. He says he's found an answer to the matter Roland had requested. It looks like Kyle Sichi has outdone himself again, and our boy can't wait to see the results. We promptly cut to Research Lab number 4. Inside one of the rooms, Kyle Sichi is busy conducting experiments with chemicals. He bows his head respectfully to Roland before revealing that the black water from the southernmost region actually consists of multiple types of liquid. Kyle Sichi carried out some experiments following methods in intermediate chemistry, and discovered that he could separate these liquids through distillation. Not to mention they're all combustible. The liquids that rise to the top are the most reactive ones. The liquid in the tube is the most explosive among all categories. Roland is glad to see the discovery. Up next, Kyle is responsible for figuring out how to mass-produce them. We then transition to Neverwinter City. There, we see one guy in the crowd particularly in high spirits. Actually, his poultry farming business is booming, with over 100 employees working under him and countless chickens and ducks on his farms. Since his business is doing so good, people often call him the Ducking Chicken Knight. As he's having the time of his life talking to himself and laughing with joy, the onlookers can't help but take note of this guy's unusually happy mood. Suddenly, a guy calls out to him and tells him that Roland needs him for something. The guard who came to relay the message didn't explain why His Majesty was calling. The chicken farmer has no clue why he's being summoned out of the blue, especially since the farmer mobilization meeting just ended. Being overly optimistic, all his success is getting over his head, making him believe the Majesty perhaps wants to make an example out of him for others. At the third border city, under the foot of the North Slope, we meet Roland being followed by the chicken farmer. It looks like they're heading into a tunnel where Roland is farming those deep-sea creatures. The farmer is flabbergasted to see such a massive and spacious tunnel. We then cut a little earlier, when he first met the Majesty. Before coming to Border City 3, Roland had explicitly told him the job he's about to perform is very confidential. He's absolutely not allowed to tell anyone about what he's going to do. While the chicken guy agreed to the terms, he's sweating about the unknown ahead. I have a feeling this guy will be in charge of taking care of those deep-sea bug farms. Right away, they come across two divine punishment witches. They stare at the commoner before asking His Majesty if having a mortal around is really safe. Roland reveals that he doesn't intend to keep his people in the dark about what's happening behind the scenes. Sooner or later, he plans to reveal everything to the public. So by involving important people, like those working in City Hall, it's the first step. At this moment, Pasha drops down from the ceiling with her massive body, causing the poor chicken farmer to absolutely lose his soul out of his body. Bro literally feels numb down to his knees and plops over, while Roland casually greets Pasha like they're best buddies forever. Roland wants a brief report about how the bug farming is going. Pasha reveals that there's significant growth in their numbers. As long as there's an abundance of mushrooms, they can keep eating forever. Roland is relieved that raising these bugs isn't a big headache. He then finally introduces her to the chicken guy, mentioning she used to be a very famous lady in her time. Of course, the chicken guy isn't sure from which angle this giant monster looks anything like a lady. That's when Pasha pokes the guy on the head, giving him a visual of her human appearance in his mind. Roland proceeds to walk towards the bug farming nest. As they walk, Roland briefs the guy about how 400 years ago, these witches lived on barren land and built their own towns. However, a disaster befell their town, and they somehow ended up in these grotesque bodies. Now they're immortal monsters, forced to live with this pain forever. Now that Roland has decided to take in these survivors, they're considered Neverwinter's allies in the fight against the devils and citizens of Grey Castle. But, as anyone can see, it's pretty normal for people to think negatively of them because of how they look. The farmer guy is more than willing to accept and respect their existence. While it sounds very bizarre, if it's Roland endorsing them, then there's no other choice but to believe it. That's what a loyal minister should always do. They finally arrive at the farming fields filled with giant mushrooms, where the bugs are eating away at them. Of course, the farmer guy is literally sweating just standing there. Roland reveals how they call these things rubber bugs. They're able to produce a very useful industrial material, one that's just as important as food. Since this chicken guy has a lot of experience raising ducks and chickens by feeding them worms, Roland wants him to raise these bugs as well. Unsurprisingly, the chicken guy feels like his whole world just got turned upside down. Roland further reassures the chicken guy by casually kicking one of the rubber bugs, trying to show that these big fellas aren't hostile at all. Despite their freaky size, they're extremely timid. All you have to do is collect the slime inside their stomachs from time to time. The rest of the details about these bugs are written in a manual, which Roland hands over. Chicken guy can study it first and then figure out a way to make them mature faster, so they can harvest slime more efficiently. While the chicken guy is fine with the job, he's not sure he can handle it alone. Roland already thought of that. He's free to recruit help from the First Army if needed. Plus, if he does a good enough job, the Majesty promises a reward during this year's award and merit ceremony. Later, Roland runs into Jasmine and Lyra, except they're in their devouring worm forms. After greeting Roland, the two girls quickly retreat back into their hideout. Pasha explains that Jasmine and Lyra just came out to say hello before entering hibernation. Burrowing worm vessels burn through a ridiculous amount of energy, and usually, Fulan alone handles all the digging and transporting work. No need for 3 vessels at once, but Roland tells the girls to stay awake. There are going to be plenty of new projects soon, and Neverwinter will need all the help it can get with construction. As for food, City Hall will provide everything they need. Jasmine lights up like a kid in a candy store. She never liked hibernation in the first place. Since Roland clearly has plans for them, Pasha leaves the 2 girls under his care. The next day, as Roland sits in his office, he feels like things are finally settling down. With the exploration phase wrapped up, there shouldn't be any new problems from the western region. Then a pigeon flies in, carrying a secret letter from Hill Fox. What Roland reads absolutely devastates him. He jumps out of his seat, furious, and immediately calls for a meeting with all relevant officials. In the meeting room, Brian is visibly losing his marbles after hearing the latest developments. Apparently, the royal family of Dawn has decided to stir up trouble in the eastern region this time. It's only a matter of time before they make their move, maybe even cross the border and launch a full invasion. Barov takes the opportunity to throw a polite jab at Brian, wondering aloud, if the Dawn army could just waltz into Grey Castle without a fight, what's even the point of Brian being the captain of the First Army? Brian gets a little awkward. Trying to clarify, he was just using an example. Barov tells him to be more careful with his words. Besides, if diplomacy can fix this, there's no reason to jump straight to violence. Roland cuts through the back and forth with a sharp clap, telling everyone to grab some food and clear their heads. They'll discuss things properly afterward. As the officials sip on turbulent drinks, Neverwinter's specialty for stressful times, Roland reviews Hill Fox's letter again. The key points are, Apen Moya is planning to disrupt the eastern region. Things are not looking good in the Holy City with Otto Luoxi being imprisoned. After 3 days of debates, the consensus is to take back the eastern region and destroy the church. However, Roland hasn't yet decided how they'll deal with the Kingdom of Dawn itself. He's looking for a way to get the best results with minimal sacrifice, and he's sure Andrea is the key to this. But he wants her to approach him first, not the other way around. As fate would have it, Andrea walks into his office without being summoned, a perfect chance Roland had been anticipating for. Nightingale offers her some dried fish, but Andrea looks too serious to snack. Turns out she's here to beg Roland to save Otto Luoxi, her childhood friend. Roland is sure that she acknowledges the harsh truth they discussed in the meeting. To pressure Apen into surrender, they'd need at least 3,000 soldiers. To attack the Holy City, they'd need more than 5,000, about 80% of the entire First Army. That's not even counting the costs of horses, carriages, food, and supplies. Roland is trying to subtly talk her out of it, mentally starts listing all the problems out loud, basically trying to deter her without saying no outright. Of course, Nightingale notices and pinches him hard for causing Andrea even more distress. Finally, Roland softens his tone and assures her that if everyone in here is willing to take the initiative and shake up the situation themselves, they can also find a way to overcome the disadvantages. They'll need the help of the 3 major families in the Kingdom of Dawn. If those families cooperate, they can overthrow the Moya family and end the reign of that madman Apen. Basically, Roland wants Andrea to become the ruler of the Kingdom of Dawn. She's of course completely shocked to realize this. But then her face grows somber as she insists she's not interested in the throne. Roland then suggests her father take the role. The graceful lady doesn't hesitate for a second before admitting that her father will likely say yes. If that's the case, Roland is ready to put the plan into motion, assuring her that Otto will be out of prison before she knows it. Later, once he's alone with Nightingale, she is in disbelief that she is willing to let Andrea become the ruler of Dawn. As they chat, Isabella enters the office room after a long time. She seems a little worried after learning from Agatha that the Church of Hermes is about to break apart. Roland confirms this, or at least that's what the reports say. Refugees who've escaped from the church have started showing up in Coldwind Ridge and the western region of Dawn. According to their statements, the cathedral representing the Holy City collapsed overnight. Besides, Roland is sure she's not here to talk about the church. Well, of course she's not. She's not at all concerned about the church. She's here to remind him about the countless berserk pills. A lot of people already know where these pills are stored, so if that information spreads, it could cause unnecessary complications in their plans. When Roland asks where the pills are, she reveals that they're hidden in well-secured warehouses across the Hermes Plateau, though she can't provide their exact coordinates. However, she's willing to tag along with the First Army to help find those pills, but only if Roland wants her to. The Majesty has no objections to her traveling with the First Army, but she's not to engage in any battles. Once she finds the pills, she's supposed to destroy them on the spot. Roland then gives her another task. In the Old Holy City, several monasteries still exist. Since the church has lost its ability to maintain order, those places have likely turned into living hells. He needs her to bring any orphans back to the western region. Isabella doesn't understand exactly what Roland is thinking, but she doesn't dare question his judgment. She simply bows her head in respect. Next we cut to Iris's lavish house. When she enters her room, her brother follows, questioning why she's so late today. Iris shares how Roland has set up a defense department responsible for national-level military matters. If she's going to be this late again, she suggests he just eat on his own. But her little brother believes it's worth the wait as long as he gets to eat with his beautiful sister. While eating, he asks why she didn't speak much during the meeting. She's pretty sure she already had all the answers to the daunting problems Roland has been facing. She reveals that the reason she stayed quiet during the meetings is because she's positive Roland will have Andrea take charge of the issue with the Kingdom of Dawn. She noticed how his gaze landed directly on Andrea 17 times over the past 3 days. Since Andrea isn't a member of City Hall and isn't a main decision-maker, there must be some other motive. She brags how she had to use her peripheral vision to observe this, and she's sure Roland didn't realize she was watching him all along. Her little brother can't help but feel disturbed seeing how full of herself she's become. Moving on, she reveals that she had talked to Andrea and tells her to support Roland in his endeavors. Only then will he be able to help rescue Otto. The next day, in the courtroom, Brian is once again going bonkers, promising that the First Army will exterminate all enemies, no matter how far they are. Roland then gives his verdict. He will split their troops into 2, sending one towards Hermes Plateau through Coldwind Ridge, while the other heads east to the kingdom's border. They'll attack the Kingdom of Dawn from 2 sides, aiming to take over the city of Glow by early fall. Everyone in the conference room is pleased with the decision. Iris can already tell that things are about to get a whole lot more hectic from here on out. We then cut to Lorgar, who is counting down her money, and it seems things aren't looking great for her. It only took her 2 weeks to spend over 3/4 of the money she had. Most of her money went to buying expensive drinks at Evelyn's complex winehouse. The prices at that damned place are literally daylight robbery. Then again, she shouldn't be blaming others for her own financial failure. After all, she willingly paid for everything herself. She continued to chug down drinks, and Evelyn kept bringing more and more. Honestly, now that she thinks about it, those drinks were so delicious that she just couldn't resist herself. Every drink tasted amazing, no matter how distinct or unique each one was. Anyway, seeing her dwindling reserves, the only thing that brought poor Lorgar any comfort was immense sorrow. A while later, she finds herself in a forest. She strips off her clothes and transforms into her wolf form. As she's running through the forest, a monster suddenly charges at her. But Lorgar simply leaps out of the way, causing poor Maggie to dive headfirst into the ground. Of course, we all know it's Maggie. Even Lorgar begins to recognize the sound of the monster, realizing it's someone she's heard before. The wolf lady musters up the courage to ask if the monster is Maggie. Naturally, Maggie reacts with immense shock upon hearing a wolf speak. Just then, Lightning arrives on the scene and asks this wise wolf for her identity. Lorgar immediately transforms back into her human form and introduces herself as Lorgar Burnflame, from the desert. She came here following Ash and Andrea. During her travels, she mentioned Maggie, which is how she had a hunch it was her. Maggie recalls seeing Lorgar back on the ship when she delivered a message to Ash. Meanwhile, Lightning finds it unfair that nobody told Lorgar about her. So, our adventurous girl takes it upon herself to introduce herself to this wise wolf, the greatest explorer in the western region. Well, more like the greatest explorer in Grey Castle. It's then that Maggie notices a small but interesting detail about Lorgar. "Why are you naked?" she asks while staring at her. Poor curious Maggie continues to stare at the naked wolf, earning a bonk on the head from Lightning for making their guest uncomfortable by staring at her. Lorgar quickly gets dressed and asks both of them why they attacked her. Lightning embarrassingly admits that they thought Lorgar was a mutated snow wolf. You see, both of their jobs include patrolling for demonic beasts, hunting food for the castle, and keeping an eye on the entire Northwest. Not to mention, they also steal bird eggs, pick beehives, and play hunt games. Though these activities aren't part of their original job, Maggie is a sucker for them. Anyway, very few people find their way out here. Plus, months of demon activity just recently ended, so it was unusual to see a monster in the wild. Now that Lightning has explained their side of the story, they throw the question right back at Lorgar. This isn't barren land. She could have bumped into demonic beasts, and there are much more dangerous things out here. So both girls are curious to know why she came all the way out here by herself. She then finally comes clean that she's looking for the devils. There are rumors about an abandoned city, and she's heard they were once spotted there, and she plans to hunt those nasty beings down. Lightning can barely hold back her laughter as she watches this gullible woman speak so bluntly about devils, as if they're just stray dogs she can take down. She finally reveals to this not-so-wise wolf that it's been over 400 years since devils appeared in Tequila. There's always the danger they could return at any moment, which is exactly why she patrols these lands. However, if she wants to find the abandoned city, it's going to take at least a week. The barren lands cover a vast area. If her directions are off by even a little, she won't find that city. You see, that place used to be known for its fertile soil, and it's much bigger than Grey Castle. In fact, it's even bigger than the Four Kingdoms combined. The poor girl feels dejected, knowing it's going to be a pain in the ass to find those devils. Meanwhile, Lightning can't help but notice how Lorgar's been putting her life at risk. Following rumors to find Devil's origin. So, both adventure-seeking girls get excited and invite Lorgar to join their exploration group, offering her more security and freedom to explore uncharted territories with them. But it looks like the unwise wolf isn't interested in playing games with these little kids. However, her curiosity peaks when Lightning reveals she knows where the Tequila ruins are located and is willing to take her there if she joins their team. Lorgar is sold instantly, and Lightning further glamorizes how she and Maggie are the only ones who've had the liberty to touch its walls. It's not just Tequila though. Lightning knows a lot about the devils too. She's even fought powerful elite devils before. She knows things nobody else knows. Night falls, and while Lorgar may be reluctant, she has no choice but to tag along with these little girls, especially since this seems to be the only way to gather more intel on the devils. After a short journey, they stumble across a little hut smack dab in the middle of nowhere. It seems to be Lightning's base, where they'll rest for the night and continue their journey tomorrow morning. Lightning starts a bonfire and sits down to smoke some barbecue sticks. Lorgar is quite impressed by how cozy it is. wondering if they built it themselves. Lightning claims they didn't build it. It's just a natural shelter they stumbled across. The trunk was hollowed out by bugs, and its branches fell due to weathering. The branches and leaves created a natural canopy. As for the windows and door, Maggie and she made them. There are plenty of resting places like these in the barren lands. Lorgar feels the vibe here. She sits down and takes a bite of the meat Lightning just roasted. The food is so delicious that the wise wolf can't hide her joy. Apparently, this isn't just any regular meat. It's a lake frog caught in the icy springs of the snowy mountains. It took Lightning quite a bit of effort to catch it. Lightning adds that, as explorers, trying new foods is part of their job. The food is so tasty that Lorgar can't get over it. The next day, they continue their journey and finally reach the place they've been looking for. When Lorgar takes in the full view of the abandoned Tequila City, she can't help but realize how massive it is. The sheer size of it is 6 times that of Iron Sand City. Assuming a ratio of 1 to 10, there would have been at least a few million people, including the villages outside the city. This place was once the last line of defense for the Witch Kingdom, but unfortunately, they failed to defend themselves against the devils. Lorgar is fascinated by how they were able to build such a huge city, yet still failed against the devils. Now that she thinks about it, Roland was right when he emphasized the level of threat the upcoming Battle of Divine Will represents. Lorgar then questions if the devils happen to enter Neverwinter, which direction they would come from. As far as Lightning's understanding goes, they could come from anywhere west of the ruins. It gets pretty dangerous deeper into the barren lands, including traveling in the sky. The reason behind this is that there's fog, and the sky sometimes turns red. It's something the devils need to survive, similar to how humans need air to breathe. The weather's great today, so the sky is clear and blue, but when it's cloudy or rainy, you'll often see red fog on the horizon if you fly high enough. It's like poison to the witches. Any contact with it is enough to critically injure you. Since they don't know how far the fog can spread, they rarely cross over Tequila. Devils' main weakness is the tube on their bodies, but if Lorgar ever bumps into enemies, it's better for her to retreat immediately and report the matter to His Majesty. Lightning then hands her a map since she's part of the exploration team. The map marks all the unexplored areas, and if Lorgar happens to go into these areas, she can draw anything she finds, like bird nests, beehives, or wolf dens. The most important rule is that she's not allowed to keep all the loot for herself. She has to share it equally among the team members. Lightning then reveals that they'll be leaving Neverwinter because Roland is about to dispatch the First Army to the eastern region and Hermes. It's likely that she and Maggie will have to leave with the First Army and won't be back for a few months. So, while she helps the First Army sniff out the enemies and fine-tune the cannons, Lorgar is to stay here and explore the barren lands. We then cut to Bordertown. In the office, Roland looks utterly exhausted. Ever since he gave orders for the expedition, he's been holding several meetings a day. The feeling of having power was great at first, but now it's starting to tire him out. If he didn't have Scroll organizing and filtering out the numbers, he would have left all this work to his subordinates. It's then that Iris appears in the office with a revised battle strategy in her hands. According to her strategy, they can use the powers of the witches and Tequila people to initiate random raids in various locations. This way, their enemies will have a hard time defending themselves, and they'll be fighting them both in the sky and on the land. Roland understands the effectiveness behind her strategy, which is expected of Iris, though it's not perfect. If he wants these strategies to be carried out smoothly, he'll need to ensure the Tequila witches are willing to listen to his orders. So, to make sure of that, he'll need to get them experience the dream world at least for once. The next scene takes us into the dream realm, where Roland wakes up to a phone call from Garcia. He picks up the phone, and she's already mad that he hasn't shown up at the promised time. After all, he was the one who wanted to learn more about the corrosion of this world. The association decided on a time for newcomers to visit, and it's happening this afternoon. She tells him to come to the designated place after he has breakfast. Roland questions why it's so urgent since the meetup was supposed to be this afternoon. Garcia yells at him again, reminding him that he's not the only new member, and they need time to meet with other members from different regions. In order to avoid her wrath, Roland gets moving. He meets Zero in the other drawing area and informs her before leaving the apartment. She thinks maybe he's going out for a morning jog, and Roland kind of confirms it. Before leaving, he assures her that he might be a little late, so she'll have to fend for herself. With that, he walks out, shutting the door behind him. As Roland walks through the streets, he notices a lot of people on their daily jogging routines. This motivates him to go jogging himself. Once he arrives at the storeroom where he's set up his new base, we meet all the witches from before. After pleasantries, Roland drops a tidbit about a special task he has for them. According to Garcia, the association will bring the new members to their headquarters when they show them around. They usually keep the location of the headquarters a secret, and that's why Roland wants to take this opportunity to figure out where they've been storing the force of nature. To do that, he needs their help. Fadi is all in to assist Roland with her bugs. She plants one of her bugs inside his body so she can always know where he is and what he's doing. Looks like bro dislikes these creepy crawlies just as much as I do. Back to business. He wants to confirm if they've all learned how to hail a taxi by now. The girls quickly explain the step-by-step procedure for getting a taxi and the etiquette for riding one. Once they arrive at the headquarters, Roland wants Ling to sneak inside. Even though there are no divine judgment stones in this world, there might be another method the association is using to disrupt magic, so they all need to be cautious. If they think the infiltration plan is falling apart, they can prioritize their safety and retreat. One of the witches is told to stay behind and take care of everyone else. Roland further offers her money for takeout, which should be enough for 3 meals a day. The meat girl quickly expresses her desire to join the infiltration team, as she's also good at infiltration. But Roland assures her that her contribution isn't necessary. If she does exactly as she's told, he promises to take her to the cinema next time. The girl's eyes light up and she becomes all cute and smitten when Roland pats her. A while later, Roland finally spots Garcia in the corridor. The guy sprinted down here and is now panting heavily, as if he just ran a marathon. Garcia notices him and decides to end her phone call. It looks like Roland overheard a bit of the conversation and wonders if the Clover group is talking about demolition again. Garcia responds coldly, saying it's none of his business. They have some small talk, and during the conversation, Garcia asks about the girls who have been living with him in his house. Roland quickly brushes the topic aside, eager to change his clothes before doing anything else. A while later, Bro returns looking like a true gentleman in a 3-piece suit. Since it's his first time visiting the headquarters, being a little formal is natural. Now that he's becoming an official member, he can't afford to be too casual. Otherwise, they might think he's rude. It's clear Garcia is a bit flustered seeing him look so good, but being the tsundere type, she brushes off the compliment and decides to move on to avoid further embarrassment. Later, the pickup bus arrive and they proceed to get on. Roland notices the bus doesn't have any number plates, and he can't see what's inside through the windows. Just as he's about to board, Fadi and the other witches signal Roland before getting into a taxi, letting him know their plan is going just as intended. Garcia finally ushers Roland onto the private bus, so private that even the windows are meticulously blocked. As she drags him to the last seat, he asks if the guys on the bus aren't her colleagues. Garcia explains that the Martialist Association isn't a company. Most of the people on this bus are like him. They've just awakened, so it's their first time seeing each other. Roland notices the strong hostility emanating from these guys. Garcia then reveals that not every awakened person has noble intentions. Some of them used to be fence-sitters, and they were forced to lean toward the association due to how bad the erosion had gotten. It's normal for these guys to be in unusually bad moods. In the past, conflicts arose where new awakeners killed association members during their missions. Eventually, the defenders had to step in and eliminate them. If any of them try to provoke him, she suggests ignoring them. The association will punish them severely. The force of nature granted to them by the gods was meant for self-defense, not to take things from others. If they don't stop the erosion, this world might cease to exist. Many are so busy enjoying their powers that they've forgotten their responsibilities. Roland understands. It's possible that the witches 800 years ago thought the same way before they established the Union to fight against the devils. Out of the blue, the bus comes to a sudden halt and begins to descend. Garcia reassures a nervous Roland that they're just in an elevator. She shifts his attention to the outside, where they can see the floors as they descend. Given how many floors this place has, even the entire third border city seems like a small town in comparison. The others are also fascinated by the massive size of the headquarters. Roland starts to worry if Ling will even be able to find her way down here. Eventually, they reach a spot with a giant monument standing in the middle. Soon after, people start pouring out of their buses, instantly crowding the area. The reason for the crowd is that the association has countless branches, but only 2 headquarters. If he wants to experience the erosion by himself, he must visit one of these 2 headquarters. Not only can you see erosion here, but you can also touch it. However, it's better to avoid physical contact. The lights go down, leaving only spotlights illuminating the monument and one on a woman who appears out of nowhere on stage. She welcomes everyone to Prism City and introduces herself as Lan, the chief disciple of Rock's defenders. The audience, however, isn't really interested in hearing her talk. After all, they didn't travel all this way just to be greeted by a chief disciple. They want the real deal. Lan calms the eager crowd down and explains that the defenders usually welcome the new disciples. However, something happened in Sky City, and as a result, the master and the other 3 defenders had to leave a few days ago. Since she didn't want to delay the tour, she stepped in to continue it. Since many people here have been awakened for years, she can't truly treat everyone as newcomers. But now that circumstances have changed, she views their arrival as a sign that everyone here acknowledges the association's power. Naturally, everyone must push everything else aside for now and focus on defeating the fallen evils. The association doesn't care about their identity or status. they only care about future performance. The more dangerous the situation, the more important it is for the Awakeners to work together. If any of them can't accept the association's methods, they're free to leave. The room falls into silence as Roland can't help but notice how cunning the chief disciple actually is. Garcia grows a little agitated at Roland's unspoken criticism of her soul master. She further suggests that Roland stay out of her master's sight, as she has no patience for irresponsible people who are always late to arrive. The chief disciple cuts through the chatter with sharp, resounding claps. Since no one is leaving, she assumes everyone has made their choice. With that, the association welcomes all newcomers. She requests everyone to follow her as she wants to show them the disaster the world is about to face. Everyone will soon realize how close the battle of divine will is to them. The mention of the divine will shocks Roland. It doesn't make sense as to why is she speaking about something that doesn't belong to this world. Roland then notices Garcia's calm demeanor, which indicates that she already knows all about divine will and whatever else the chief disciple has mentioned. Once the speech concludes, the chief disciple leads everyone down more floors. By now, Roland is dying to know why the headquarters is so deep underground. It seems excessive if they're only trying to protect themselves or keep things confidential. Garcia assures him not to be too surprised. This place used to be a mine, and the lift tunnels were modified from abandoned mining caves. She then points out that some of the floors are new, dug further down as the erosion spreads. She reveals that no one can stop the erosion, not even the association. Rather than just protecting itself from the erosion, the association focuses on dealing with awakened individuals who have ill intentions. While it doesn't make sense to Roland now, she promises he'll understand soon enough. As all the participants take their seats in one of the auditoriums, Roland notices how well guarded the entire room is. The chief disciple grabs everyone's attention and begins narrating how an evil force has appeared in their world. The number of fallen evils increased drastically, threatening the lives of awakened individuals. However, she clarifies that the so-called evil force is not evil at all. Another world is overlapping with their own. She then reveals the source of this erosion, which is a dark red hole-like thing. Roland has no clue what it is, while Garcia reveals that this is a small part of the erosion. The entire world is becoming riddled with such holes. This is the essence of the erosion. One person stands up and insists on further explanation about this erosion. Everyone has questions. They all want to know what this other world is and what these fallen evils are. The chief disciple silences them all and proceeds with a little presentation to clear up the confusion. After a brief verbal explanation, she demonstrates by shoving a stick into the red hole. The stick erodes as soon as it makes contact with the bubble. One of the guys volunteers to try it by himself. Once given permission, he stands in front of the red hole, pours magic into his hand, and tries to grab the bubble. The poor bastard loses all of his fingers the moment he touches it. As he is escorted to the infirmary, the chief disciple confidently states that this demonstration is enough to convince them just how dangerous the erosion is. Roland stands up to get a closer look himself. When he examines the red light coming from the hole, it looks strangely familiar. He recalls seeing something similar on the Divine Land. Specifically, one of the 4 paintings had shown this. The chief disciple seems to recognize Roland. Garcia has mentioned him several times to her. As she had described it, Roland is one of the very few awakened individuals who awakened independently. She finds this quite rare for an ordinary person, and is glad he is willing to join the association. Even though she despises people who are always late, she supposes it's a common flaw among many. In her roundabout way, she assures him that his shortcomings can be overlooked if he showcases his full potential without holding anything back. Otherwise, he will be eliminated eventually. She then suggests he return to his seat if he is done examining the hole. Roland says nothing and sits back down. According to the research files from the underground civilization, the red moon is key to converting magic. It is also the foundation for the existence of dreams. Witches can see the true form of the red moon because they are in the real world. But this place was created using his and Zero's memories. Meanwhile, Garcia is certain that Roland must now believe her, as everything is right before his eyes. Roland has never doubted her judgment. However, he doesn't think her master is as intimidating as Garcia had made him out to be. Of course, the eye patch lady has no idea what he is trying to imply. Roland then adds that the chief disciple has said a lot of things to him, something about him being extraordinary, and how the association really desires his contribution. Garcia isn't sure what she's talking about, since she didn't see her master say a single word while he was over there. The way Garcia mentioned it, though, makes it sound like she literally saw nothing, which kind of shocks Roland out of his wits. Meanwhile, the chief disciple decides to start explaining all the juicy details she's got. First, about the source of the erosion. The world they're living in isn't flat. It's more like a membrane. The membrane has a curvature, in other words, it's bent. Some places are more curved than others. So, if there are other worlds outside their world, there's one possibility. 2 worlds have started overlapping at a certain point, which is causing the erosion. Of course, whatever she's saying makes absolutely no sense to anyone. Meanwhile, the lady continues to point out how this overlap caused the two worlds to temporarily share a connection. She doesn't know how this will affect the world over there. But this world they are currently living in is definitely being influenced. Power coming from that other world is causing natural phenomenons. Whether it's martial artists or fallen evils, the power gained by all awakeners is connected to this. Everything is linked together. Of course, the awakened folks get annoyed when they hear the harsh truth. Their powers are a byproduct of this erosion anomaly. They strongly object, stating that their powers belong to them and no one else. She admits that martial artists can control their powers, but fallen evils can't because martial artists are in the early stages of the overlap. As the energy spreads, more and more martial artists will turn into fallen evils. It's a struggle for survival. If they don't defeat the fallen evils, not only the normal awakened people, but the human world will be completely destroyed by them. Roland suddenly wakes up in his office, startled by Nightingale. Once he's done dismissing Barov, Nightingale points out how he's been zoning out a lot lately. She wonders if it's related to the dream world's erosion. Roland assures her that there's nothing serious going on. It's just that he's a little confused about a few things, nothing to worry about. Seems like it's already been 4 days since he left the dream world. Faldi managed to locate the headquarters, but Ling failed to infiltrate it. Then again, there weren't any setbacks, so it's all good. Nightingale creeps up on him again to remind him how he's zoning out once more. Once again, Roland assures her that everything is fine, but Nightingale knows he's not being completely honest. She suspects that maybe he's been doing some questionable, immoral stuff with those witches in his dream world. Poor guy defends himself against the baseless allegations, claiming that he only let them try various kinds of food. Nightingale assures him that she's just joking around. She's actually worried about his safety since she can't be in his dream world to protect him. She fears that being left alone with 20 thirsty witches craving pleasure might end up causing him more harm than he realizes. Of course, her wild imagination only earns her Roland's disdain while she continues to act sly and nonchalant, claiming she's just joking. Roland teases her back, saying that if he had her ability, it would definitely tell him she's lying and that she's been trying to ask this question since the very beginning. Finally, Nightingale admits her mistake. Suddenly, there's a knock on the door, and in walks Hunter Iron Axe. Roland hopes that Iron Axe already knows the battle plan for Neverwinter. Looks like Iron Axe isn't aware of all the details, though. He only got a little information from Brian, but there's one thing he doesn't understand. Brian will be responsible for taking over for him and protecting Miss Echo in Port Clearwater. If that happens, who's going to be responsible for the Eastern Battlefront? Roland points out that Brian is still lacking in experience. His defense is solid, but accidents are bound to happen if he leads a huge army by himself. So, Iron Axe will be in charge of the army heading east. The brave hunter then curiously asks who's heading to the west. Roland expresses his desire to handle it himself. We then cut to Agatha, who's asking Isabella if she's ready for their trip, since they'll be leaving tomorrow, and she doesn't want her falling behind. Isabella reveals that she doesn't have any spare clothes, and she doesn't know what to bring. Hearing this, Agatha decides to take her shopping for new clothes. While Isabella feels warmth from Agatha's kind gesture, she reveals that she doesn't have any money. The Icy Witch is more than happy to lend her some. Even then, Isabella isn't sure if she can muster up the courage to enjoy pleasures unless she finally sees the outcome of this divine war. Well, the Icy Witch isn't sure if staying dejected like this all these years will be worth it. After all, the divine war won't end that soon, so she gotta lift her chin up and enjoy the time she has, since worrying about the future won't help at all. This is the moment Isabella gets overwhelmed with emotions and happily embraces Agatha's extended hand. Later that night, we see Roland sleeping with his best girl, Anna. The girl isn't sure if they should be getting laid when there's so much to take care of. Roland reassures her that they've been preparing all this time, so they deserve this little break together. Plus, this expedition isn't just about fighting. Publicity is important too. They've got to make an impression, and it's not possible if he doesn't have a beautiful female partner by his side for the banquets. Let's not intrude on their privacy and let them enjoy this night they are sharing. The day of departure arrives, and Roland's big steamboats have started sailing. On one of them is himself and Nightingale, and they're about to arrive at Redwater City. He tells her to inform all advisors to gather in the upper observation room for a meeting. Later, once all the big shots have arrived in the meeting room, one of the guys reveals that Redwater City is the second most developed city in the central region, aside from the old royal capital. Its territory is huge, and there are many nobles. So, he's afraid they won't be able to take care of things as quickly as they did with Willowtown. He suggests organizing a meeting with the leader of Redwater, Earl Delta, to try to convince him before issuing orders to redraw entrustment rights. That being said, the guy is sure that many nobles already know the purpose of their visit, and if those guys still decide to go against their plan, the guy suggests sending out the army right away to obliterate them. Roland then inquires if there's a faster way to handle this. Actually, he doesn't want to spend too much time visiting Willowtown, as there are still a few cities left to visit after their current target. If they take this much time in every city, summer will be over before they even reach Coldwind Ridge. This is when Iris steps forward with a solution in mind. However, her solution might tarnish Roland's reputation a bit. We cut to the nobles of Willowtown, who are fuming after reading the letter sent by the Majesty. The letter highlights how Roland Wimbledon has taken away all the rights belonging to the leader of Willowtown and claimed the land for himself. The nobles are livid just thinking about how this so-called king has been stripping every noble of their status and taking their inherited lands for himself. But what can they do against such a powerhouse of a king? Timothy was defeated within days, and the church was too, leaving no thorns in Roland's path toward his dictatorship. They all remember how the Western Army came to Redwater and defeated their enemies within days. Anyone touched by that white powder Roland produced dies. Even those wearing heavy armor struggle to survive against it. This is when a blonde man comes up with a plan. As far as he's concerned, that white powder may be powerful, but it's not invincible. It requires a large area of space to release its full power. The more spacious the area, the more powerful the powder becomes. But if they can restrict it to a smaller space, its capabilities will be limited. For example, when Roland arrives at Redwater, he will likely stay in the palace. As long as they have more of their people in the castle, Roland will be at a disadvantage. A silver-haired man questions if Earl Delta is willing to cooperate in this endeavor. The blonde man believes Delta would never do something like this, given his personality. He wouldn't even fight for himself if they put a knife to his throat. However, the blonde man has heard from workers that the castle has many secret passages leading outside. All they need to do is split their men up and get them in there beforehand. One man raises the concern that this action will be considered an act of rebellion, and if they kill Roland, his army will crush everyone there. The blonde man quickly reassures the group that they don't plan to kill him. All they need to do is take control and hold Roland hostage. As long as he stays alive, his army won't dare to act rashly, and they might even force them to retreat. Once this spreads, the other nobles will surely side with Willowtown. Not to mention, the only land this king controls is that small region in the west. Just thinking about overthrowing Roland makes the blonde man grin maniacally. The others begin chattering among themselves, realizing how much they stand to gain if this plan succeeds. The first step is to select a few trustworthy knights to follow the blonde man's orders. As for the rest, the blonde man suggests practicing patience. Finally, Roland's giant steamships arrive at Willowtown's port, much to the blonde man's annoyance. He can't stomach how much attention Roland is attracting with his massive ships that need no air to sail. Under his breath, he asks the knight next to him about the current preparations. The knight reveals that they have 51 people in place, and they just need 2 more days to get the rest of them in position. The blonde man can't help but smirk at the prospect. He's confident that they have plenty of time, and the chances of winning have just increased marginally. As soon as Roland approaches, these filthy backstabbers, who are about to betray our boy, introduce themselves and pay their respects. The blonde man also introduces himself as George Neri, the owner of Rock Ridge and an earl. George wastes no time bragging about how his Rock Ridge is known for its top-quality tea and fruit wine. It would be an honor if Roland would visit his humble territory. Roland seems quite interested and asks where it's located. Of course, George wasn't expecting Roland to show such interest in Rock Ridge. He thought this conversation might end with our boy showing no interest, but the opposite happens. With no other option, George starts rattling off precise directions to his territory. Just a short walk east, 2 leagues at most, and the first ridge comes into view. Nestled beneath it lies the land of the Nurley family. Roland smiles politely in response. He even tosses in a few honeyed words, saying he hopes George will treasure the peerless view from the Rock Ridge. Then he just walks off, leaving that bastard George standing there, stewing in his own thoughts. Everything's going according to plan. He wants Roland to fall soon enough, because he's damn tired of pretending in front of this soft-spoken trash king. The night is still young, and love is in the air when Roland enters the banquet hall. On his arm is the woman he treasures most, a vision in formal wear that makes half the room forget how to breathe. Behind her trail Iris, Isabella, Phyllis, and a contingent of knights dressed like royalty. As he catches up with the nobles, we see some guy offering a drink to George. The guy accepts the drink and asks the man if he has any insider info regarding Roland. While the man doesn't have any strong leads, the lady beside Roland feels kind of suspicious to him. She just stands out too much. If she were from a noble family, he would have known about her by now, but that doesn't seem to be the case. That's when George smirks and reveals that she's likely a witch. This bastard clearly has a massive hate boner for witches, and he's already thinking about enslaving all these bitches. I mean witches once Roland falls. The 2 bastards then clink their glasses and have the time of their lives drinking and scheming. As the banquet continues, with these shady dudes plotting Roland's downfall, one of the fat cats silences everyone so the Majesty can speak a little. Once everyone's eyes are on him, Roland starts his speech by thanking the Earl for hosting such an extravagant banquet. He's also genuinely happy to see so many important figures attending. He's sure that almost all the nobles residing around Redwater City are here tonight. That fat cat confirms that aside from 2 nobles who claim to be ill, everyone else is present. With that, Roland decides to seize the moment and drop a truth bomb. From today onwards, Redwater City and all the surrounding territories will belong to the Kingdom of Greycastle. In other words, they'll belong to him, and literally, no one else will own any land. This, of course, shocks the hell out of everyone present, especially George, who looks absolutely boggled out of his damn mind. He can barely believe Roland Wimbledon managed to convince Earl Delta ahead of time. Earl Delta himself is sweating his sagging sack of balls, worried about the backlash he'll face for siding with Roland. He was hoping Roland would ease into this bombshell, not drop it like a damn meteor. But Roland shuts this pig up real quick. He knows exactly what kind of people he's dealing with here. Some of them will hop onto the carriage of progress and ride alongside him. The rest will turn to dust trying to block his path. Naturally, the fat cat is boggled by the idea that Roland already knows about their shady schemes. In response, Roland assures this bastard that he has the ability to read people's hearts. Iris steps in to emphasize Roland's might. All the nobles need to do is repeat what she says and they'll realize there's no hiding their true thoughts. Roland can tell that none of them have been truthful to him so far, but understandable. If he were them, he wouldn't trust some king from Greycastle's borders either. He gestures for Iris to continue. She begins the next line they're supposed to say, "Even though I don't understand what Roland wants, my right to freedom isn't that important to me. As long as I have other ways to gain profit, I'm willing to give it a try." Naturally, the nobles all start parroting the line, but Roland notices that only 4 of them actually mean it. Still, just being willing to try is enough to earn a ticket on the bus of evolution. In the face of change, the courage to try is the most valuable trait. So he tells a few selective nobles to step aside. Meanwhile, George is absolutely losing his marbles watching these bozos so willing to follow Roland's ideals. Since they don't seem the least bit worried about losing their lands, George starts thinking maybe these idiots are just puppets under Roland's control. Now, it's time for the 3rd sentence these hobos are supposed to recite. And since Earl Delta is the biggest coward in the room, he is first to recite the lines. The others follow him soon after. Roland once again filters out the 2 who were being honest. George, on the other hand, has officially lost his bananas. He has no damn clue how this new king managed to get everyone on his side. This should have been impossible. If Roland had been in talks with these people, George would have noticed. Roland, meanwhile, tries to hammer some sense into these bastards that surrendering to a higher power isn't something to be ashamed of. Human society has always formed hierarchies based on power. It's important to understand where you stand and to know your limits. He then further assures them they won't be treated unfairly. Iris continues to chant each line our guy wants these nobles to agree to. Eventually, Roland presents the final sentence he wants these bitches to say. This line is designed to confirm whether they still harbor any intention of assassinating the king to save their lands. Once they hear that last line, a heavy silence falls over the room. George looks like he's about to pass out. One of the nobles hesitantly declares that he'd never betray the Wimbledon family, and George and the rest echo the same. But Roland knows better. He already sees through their thoughts. He knows they're planning this shit in their heads right now. He promises them that if they act on those thoughts, their crimes will be revealed. And by then, they won't even deserve to work in the mines. They'll get only one thing: death. With that, Roland commands his unit to bring these traitors to their knees. George, of course, thinks he can easily wipe out this small unit. Even if one of them is a witch, as long as he and his crew are wearing the stones of divine judgment, she can't do jack shit. He instantly gestures for his fellow to execute their plan, but the guy immediately starts throwing a tantrum, complaining that they're being accused of something they haven't even committed. Roland shouldn't be so sure without any hard evidence. These bitches can whine all they want, but my guy remains unhinged. Meanwhile, George is foolish enough to think that he has the upper hand. His ally charges at our party with a massive sword, but it's the bastard who loses his head in the process, leaving George and the others shitting their pants. One by one, Phyllis butchers all of those who had been plotting Roland's demise. George is struck by a reality check he can't even fathom. The few others who remained behind quickly fall to their knees and surrender right away. It is then that George realizes that it's Roland who is playing real chess while the others are playing checkers. Roland intentionally left the First Army outside on purpose. There were only about 100 guards, and only 6 of them attended the banquet. He pretended to be forceful, not leaving them any room to back out. He finally realizes the harsh truth. Roland never planned to spare the remaining nobles. Even if they surrender now, it won't change the outcome. It's already too late for everyone to surrender. And thus, everyone present meets their demise instantly. Iris is glad to see how the plan is being carried out meticulously. First, Isabella nullified the stones of divine judgment the nobles had. Then, Nightingale used her lie-reading ability. Lastly, Iris butchered every motherfucker with ill intentions, leaving only 4 nobles who had passed the first question. Iris can't help but marvel at Roland's cunning and meticulous planning. She's now feeling glad she chose to follow a ruler like him. Roland then questions Delta if there are any other banquet halls in this manor. Delta quickly spills the details that it's right next to them. Roland decides to go there. He also wants Delta to produce a list of traitors because he wants it tonight. He then loudly assures the other noble guests that only traitors will be punished. Now that this kingdom has obtained peace, Roland's priority will be to restore order around Redwater as soon as possible. For that, he needs their help. All the remaining nobles kneel in submission, as it's better to adhere to orders than to be dead. Roland then tells everyone to get up. He assigns them their first mission to prove their loyalty. Now that all land belongs to him, there is no longer any purpose in keeping the original boundaries. So he needs every noble family to gather in Redwater City, including their residences, people, and animals living on their lands. Earl Delta raises the concern of food shortages if they were to gather everyone here. Redwater wouldn't have enough food to keep everyone fed. Even if they made them all farm, there wouldn't be enough fields for them to work with. Not to mention, many people might fight back when forced to relocate. Roland assures them there's nothing to worry about. In just a few minutes, he fills Delta in with some juicy details, which is enough to get this fat cat assured. A while later, Roland is alone with Iris. With the food problem solved, Roland believes they've successfully secured Redwater City. Now, it's time for Silver City and the old capital. However, Iris reveals that the latter has already been taken care of, so all they need is a suitable candidate to sit there as leader. Roland isn't sure how the other routes are doing. If everything goes smoothly, Iron Axe should reach Golden Wheat City tomorrow. He then orders her to return to the office for now, as there's plenty of work to get done tonight. According to their plan, the moment they get the list of all the traitors, they will be dealt with by the First Army. Iris acknowledges the orders and decides to take her leave. But before she leaves, Roland stops her and compliments her for the flawless strategy she had suggested. Of course, this sudden flattery takes her by surprise. Nonetheless, she maintains her sincerity and simply pays her respects for the acknowledgement. It seems like everything is going just as she had intended. She wanted Roland to rely on her, and she's glad she can now take care of things the way she desires. We then cut to Golden Wheat City, where we see Iron Axe Hunter along with his sidekick. Iron Axe is surprised to see this city in such a sorry state, especially since its name suggests prosperity. Whatever the case, the guy beside him doesn't care about the city's condition, as long as he manages to fulfill Roland's orders. Their job is to take over one city at a time. Iron Axe Hunter then highlights that using force is not their priority. As Iris told him, if they want to reclaim the eastern region, taking care of rebelling nobles is the best move. The scene then shifts to the officials of Golden Wheat City. They're paying respects to their fallen king, Timothy. The Big Cheese then instructs his butler, Bell, to note down everything he's about to say. Roland's armies are said to attack Golden Wheat City today after a night's rest. So, as the Duke of Golden Wheat, William Burger plans to fend off the enemy in the former king's name, and his chief knight, Grenada Wayne, shall fight alongside the Duke. The knight in question is this chick in his arms. He further tells his writer to jot down some cheesy lines about his and Grenada Wayne's bravery, but then he gives the writer the option to skip that part if it sounds too over the top. The writer, though, doesn't think there's anything wrong with the last line about bravery. For him, it's impossible for any record in this world to be written without bias. He's the scribe of Golden Wheat City, so it's only natural that his writing leans a certain way. Regardless, the Duke tells his writer to make sure he records each and every line with truth. His goal is to document the entire incident from beginning to end and tell the whole story. The Duke wants the entire world to remember the part of history he's about to make. We then promptly cut to the Golden Wheat City wall, where Duke William is trying his best to defend against Roland's massive steel ships heading their way. The cannons the Duke's team is using seem pretty inefficient and downright horrendous in terms of power and range. He then takes note of the weapon the First Army is using. They put a palm-sized shell in a thin tube, light it up, and boom, obliterate everyone over the walls. The Duke is absolutely bombasticated to see such massive power come from such a tiny weapon. The city is set ablaze within minutes of Roland's army arriving. Some of the wise guys suggest Duke William surrender instead of getting murdered unnecessarily. Knight Grenada Wayne volunteers to follow every command the Duke gives. Duke William gives his companions the option to surrender, though he himself has no plans of backing down as he wants to show his true loyalty to the late King Timothy. He and his close companions mount their horses and start charging at the enemy recklessly. What happens next is pretty predictable. These poor hobos can't stand up to the barrage of bullets coming at them, and thus, the battle ends with the enemy dying a dog's death for not surrendering. But those who did surrender are met by Hunter Iron Axe, expressing their desire to meet Roland. The captain shuts down their request, since His Majesty is too busy to come to the eastern region himself. If they want to talk to someone, he is standing right there, the one in charge of this operation. The nobles start murmuring among themselves, whispering how Roland picked a sand guy to lead the army. Not to mention, expeditions are a big deal, so how could Roland not be here himself? Iron Axe hears all their yapping, but he doesn't care what they think. Facts are facts, no matter how they feel about it. He then asks them where the Duke of Golden Wheat is. One guy starts sobbing as he reveals the Duke perished in battle. He insisted on charging headfirst with his knights and got mowed down in the bullet storm. Iron Axe takes note of the man's bravery and can't help but commend it. He then turns to his soldiers and tells them to toss the surviving nobles into the dungeon. A while later, we get a wide view of the entire city on fire. One of the soldiers rushes in, reporting that the castle is also burning. Hearing this, Iron Axe doesn't even flinch. Given how nonchalant the captain is about this fire, the soldier figures that it's an elaborate arsenal, ordered by the captain himself. Well, the humble hunter coldly admits it. Yeah, it was his order. However, the public will hear a different version. The rats hated the nobles, so they snuck into the castle through secret passages and lit up all the wheat stocks stored in the prison. To put it simply, Iron Axe doesn't have the time or energy to figure out if the nobles were actually surrendering or not, and His Majesty is already on a very tight schedule. That's why Roland decided to have him handle all matters concerning cities in the east. He then shows the soldiers some stats about Golden Wheat City. Around 5 years ago, about 230,000 people lived in Golden Wheat City and its surrounding areas. It used to be one of the most developed places around. But this year, that number dropped to 60,000. The Duke had been prepping for war, widening city walls, planting obstacles, and blocking all the roads into the city. He even flooded the fields and turned them into marshes. As a result, the city got cut off from trade. Its prosperity vanished. The decrease in farmland caused a massive drop in population too. Now the soldier finally gets why the city looked so run down. We then cut to this bald bastard who never expected Golden Wheat City to meet such a fate. He's actually the same writer who was supposed to document the brave tales of Duke William and his Lady Knight. But those two are long dead, already shredded to pieces by bullets in this confrontation. The writer was strictly told to write only the truth in the records. Still, he never intended to fake history. That's his job as a scribe. But hey, nobody in this world can be completely unbiased. Since he lives in a city owned by Roland, it's natural for his writing to carry a certain slant. Or rather, maybe that's what you'd call unprejudice. The next day, Roland receives a bunch of secret letters from the east. These letters report the fall of Golden Wheat City. It took no time for the city to crumble, thanks to firearms. Then, Roland notices something interesting in the letter. Apparently, as we already know, Iron Axe's plan to burn the city to embers had been successful. Not to mention, it worked wonders. The nobles were horrified and couldn't care less about their fiefdoms. Eventually, they started escaping to the border. With things going this way, Roland is pretty darn sure that City Hall will soon take control of Seawinshire and other fiefdoms. Well, it seems like capturing the Silver City next will be like a gentle breeze. When they arrive at Silver City, we find ourselves in the banquet hall, where Earl William introduces himself. Surprisingly, he willingly surrenders his power and pledges support to Roland's governance. The other nobles clap in applause. Earl William had always been curious about those magical machines, and he can't describe his excitement after finally having the person who invented those machines standing right in front of him. Every noble is also quite interested in learning about the machines, with many expressing their desire to own one. Roland is a bit overwhelmed by everyone's enthusiasm. If only other cities were as cooperative as Silver City, it wouldn't take him long to conquer them all. Later, Roland stands on the balcony with Earl William. When he asks if William knows anything about the Gillen family, the dude reveals that the last member of the Gillen family changed his surname. Now, that piece of land belongs to the Somi family. Roland inquires why this surname change took place. William explains that the Gillen family likely couldn't bear the weight of their responsibilities alone, so they decided to join another family. If Roland wishes to know more, William is willing to summon Gillen for him right now. Roland turns down the offer. Later, when the Majesty gets into his tent with Nightingale, she assures him that she is no longer connected to the Gillen family. Roland already trusts her on that. The lady then expresses her shock that her family changed their surname. She explains that the Somi family used to be close with her father. So, why would they make the only heir of the Gillen family change his surname? Since she has a hard time believing this fact, Roland suggests she investigate it herself. He'll have Sylvie and the Divine Punishment Witches protect him while she's away. Nightingale insists against digging into the past of the Gillen family, especially since she's no longer involved with them. Roland reminds her that this land belongs to her father, so she's relevant to this too. He gives her another reason, reminding her of the childhood she spent there while growing up. She doesn't get to come back often, and she doesn't need to worry about the church being after her. All she has to do is take a trip down memory lane and reminisce about the past. While she seems unsure about going, she asks Roland to promise one thing. If he needs to leave this place, she wants him to make sure he summons her first. Furthermore, she only desires to take a look at the new developments, and that's it. Roland waves her goodbye as she dissipates into mist. He can tell how reluctant she is about this matter, but instead of hiding something in her heart, he believes it's better to face the matter head-on. Only then can one truly let go. The next day, Nightingale arrives at the destination and finds something totally unexpected. Contrary to what she had imagined, her home isn't a rundown place. It's bustling with life. As she looks around, she notices food being distributed to the underprivileged. And the one distributing the haul is Hyde Gillen, the man who was once her brother. She decides to move forward and check on other places too. But then she notices something unusual. It turns out that her supposed brother, Hyde Gillen, isn't wearing any stone of divine judgment, even though other knights are already equipped with one. She overhears some hushed whispers between the knights. They point out how Hyde Gillen is just a normal knight who grovels at their master's feet. But it's quite unusual that this guy has a complete personality shift whenever he changes his clothes, as if he's a totally different person. After eavesdropping on their conversation, Nightingale heads toward the house where the Viscount is staying. Once she enters, she overhears the Viscount's bald butler, who is concerned about how his master lashed out at Hyde yesterday. Hyde had already surrendered everything, so showing him a little kindness was the only right thing. The Viscount acknowledges his mistake, but he couldn't control himself. After all, it took him over a decade to get where he is today. Those pieces of land in the east were supposed to be his, but Roland Wimbledon took them away with a single command. The butler reassures the Viscount that Roland is only taking away the right to the fiefdoms. If they do what Earl William did, it would be in their best interests. As long as they continue operating the businesses they have on this land, they won't suffer significant losses. The Viscount again expresses his discontent, as without power, the greedy patrols will eventually come barging into his home. And since he's running some shady operations, he fears that if Roland finds out, he'll be hanged immediately. The butler starts thinking, and decides to abandon the shady source of income. This shady business was just a temporary thing to begin with. Now that they've accumulated enough capital, they should focus on running legitimate businesses. Not to mention, the church will no longer be a thorn in their path. The Viscount reluctantly agrees. After all, he still has the Gillen family's land. The two Gillen kids have no idea what happened to their parents, and they still believe that they died in a revolt. Of course, this shocks Nightingale to her core when she learns that her parents' deaths weren't just a tragic accident, but part of an elaborate plan. The scene shifts to Nightingale's tragic past, where full-blown chaos can be seen. It was then that her parents left her behind, promising they'd be back soon enough. One day faded into another, but they never returned. Eventually, someone did come back, only to deliver the devastating news. Later, she reports all this to Roland through the listening sigil. She further reveals that she'll be staying there until evening, as she needs to ask Hyde herself. He might know something. She apologizes for causing further delays in his plans, but she must get to the heart of the matter. Roland reassures her and is willing to wait until she's done with her investigation. As for his safety, he's pretty much out of danger as long as he stays inside. He suggests she be careful though, and not to be too rash. No matter what happens, he tells her to report back to him every 4 hours. The night deepens, and the guards stationed outside begin to feel the fatigue of staying up all night. Hyde in his room suddenly jolts awake when he senses someone behind him. It turns out to be Nightingale, pressing her blade against his neck. If he makes any sound, he's as good as dead. She gives him permission to look around and take a good look at her. As he rolls his eyes at her, he notices Veronica, his sister. The lady doesn't waste time with pleasantries and demands to know how he ended up working under Somi. The guy claims it's a long story. The family had been fighting ever since Gillen Sr. died, and he didn't know the details either. All he knows is that by the time he had to take over the title, they barely had any savings. That's when the Viscount came to find him, and he had no choice but to side with him. Of course, Nightingale can sense his lies, so to get the finer details, she asks if the Viscount perhaps forced him to join the Somi family. The guy admits to this, revealing that his life had been threatened. Well, that's another lie that doesn't go unnoticed. Nightingale continues her scrutiny, asking her next question. What is he doing for the Viscount now? Perhaps he's helping the poor with food. To which the bastard claims the Viscount is using him as a cover, and he's secretly selling Dreamland water. His rats are hidden in the crowd, responsible for transporting the goods. He claims he didn't know about the shady operations the Viscount was running until recently. Well, it looks like he's lying about just finding it out. Nightingale presses him about his future plans. The scummy brother drops to his knees and begs her to help him. He admits his wrongdoings and wants her sister's support. The Viscount never treated him like a noble. He only refurbished the mansion to put up a facade. He's going to stay there and eventually be killed by the Viscount. Before the Viscount kills him, he wants her to kill the Viscount first. Because if he just ran away from there, he'd have nothing left. So he wants her to kill that bastard and his heirs. If she manages to do that, all the business will belong to him and her. Nightingale throws a disdainful stare at him and then promptly asks a question before saying anything. She wants to know why he betrayed her back then. He reveals his fear of witches. He acknowledges his foolish mistake and admits he chose to believe the lies of the church, something he now regrets. The brother is crying like a girl. The sister can sense the sincerity in his regret. He was merely deluded by the church's lies. But then again, while everyone chose to follow the church's lies, Roland was the only one who placed his faith in witches. He wasn't afraid of trusting witches cursed by the devils, and she won't abandon his trust either. With that in mind, she begins to disappear in her mist, leaving the bastard sobbing in his mess. She then scans the entire building and gets inside one of the offices. There, she finds the ledger containing all the information concerning Dreamland Water, including the amount sold and to whom it was sold. With this record, along with the goods in the mansion that have yet to be sold, she's sure she has enough evidence to expose these guys' shady business. The next day, she visits their father's grave. To get the full context of what's going on and how her parents got killed, we flash back 10 years. In the little water stream running through the Gillen family's lands, a peasant finds gold in a water bucket. They realize the source of the gold must lie underneath the Gillen family's land. And so, they paid a few contract killers a handsome amount and had Nightingale's parents killed. Once her parents were out of the way, these scumbags took Nightingale and her brother as captives. They were going to wait until Hyde, Nightingale's brother, reached adulthood to force him into giving up his land and title. However, once Nightingale awakened, she messed up their plans by killing Senior Gillen, who had been taking care of her and her brother. Viscount Somey was left with no choice and took Hyde under his wing. These bastards played with Hyde like a pawn and acquired everything from her brother, even though all this power and money originally belonged to her brother. A few days later, Hyde is behind bars. Viscount Somey has been sentenced to death by hanging, and all other family members involved in the shady business have been sentenced to 20 years of labor. With no original owner, all the land now belongs to the kingdom. She tells him to feel lucky since he wasn't considered a member of the Somey family. Otherwise, he would be slaving his life away in the mines. The bastard of a brother is pissed as well as heartbroken that his own sister does not give a fuck about him. She only intended to take her revenge, and she has succeeded. Now he is left with nothing. Nightingale also admits that she never forgave him for what he did to her. They shared a blood bond, which only gave her more reason to hate him for the betrayal. While he may think he has nothing left to his name, she points out the freedom she has granted that he desperately wanted from all those Somey family bastards. She doesn't care if he perceives this generosity as a punishment or a blessing. He's free to hate her all he wants, but from now on, they owe each other absolutely nothing. As she walks through the dark streets, she comes across Roland, who is rather surprised that she is letting her brother off the hook. He had personally been waiting for that guy to come out, just so he could deliver him the beating of his life. She in response teases him for abusing his authority as a king. The scene takes a serious turn when she drops to her knees and pledges her loyalty to him, expressing her desire to stay by his side forever. Unsurprisingly, Bro is startled by her sudden gesture, especially since they've already gone through this once. But as it turns out, Nightingale just felt like saying it again. So she did. In this case, Roland also decides to say what she desperately wants to hear. He responds to her words by approving her pledge multiple times, something Nightingale longed to hear. They share this moment with warmth and camaraderie. Days go by and we find ourselves in the old capital city. There, two kids on a rooftop are watching the king's carriage make its way through the streets. The crowd seems quite welcoming of his presence. That rooftop girl is smitten when she sees Roland waving back at them. But her brother reminds her that he's simply waving in their general direction. The girl gets annoyed at how stingy her brother is being. She can already tell that His Majesty Roland Wimbledon is a hell of a lot friendlier than the second prince. Her brother then reminds her that this so-called friendly king took the lives of a bunch of nobles, including his own brother, Timothy Wimbledon. And if you add all the rats who got executed too, that makes this king the most violent ruler in history, having killed so many people. Despite all that, the girl remains a persistent supporter of Roland. Not to mention, the king also has this sweet lady beside him, and she's undeniably pretty. Among the common folk, we notice an assassin with a crossbow on one of the towers. But before he can take his shot, Maggie knocks the bastard out, and the soldiers immediately arrest him. It's all thanks to Sylvie, who's sitting inside the carriage, keeping a bird's-eye view over everything happening. Roland can't help but thank her for that. The humble witch sees no need for gratitude as she was merely doing her job. Agatha argues that they should have taken an entirely different route if there were signs of danger to begin with. After all, Roland is just a mortal, and one brutal injury is enough to end him. That's when Anna chimes in, assuring the concerned witches that she'll block all incoming attacks. Not to mention Nana is also on the team, so they're covered. Agatha still thinks they shouldn't have taken any risks. Roland reminds her that his presence is important. After all, he's got to show his face to the people at least for once. Still, Agatha sticks to her guns, reminding him that there were several safe routes he could have taken. But he chose the hardest one. She's got a point. He could have just yelled from the castle walls if he really wanted to be seen. Finally, they arrive within the palace's boundaries. The nobles and knights are already present to welcome Roland. And so, my guy proceeds to enter the place with his entourage of cherished witches. Once he enters the king's chamber, the high-status folks are already lined up in double file, dropping to their knees as Roland walks past them. A big hooter lady makes sure to serve Roland the scepter he deserves. Once Roland reaches his throne, he initiates the meeting without bothering with pleasantries or unnecessary introductions, especially since everyone already knows who he is. He's here for two very simple reasons. First, he wants to eliminate all threats. Second, he's here to maintain order. The old capital city will adopt a governing system similar to Neverwinter. It goes without saying that members of his government and city hall will receive generous salaries and excellent working conditions. What's more, even a peasant can become a government official, if they've got the qualifications, that is. Everyone in the chamber erupts in cheers and applause at such great news. Honestly, I get why they're happy. Roland has leveled the playing field. Doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, aristocrat or peasant, everyone gets a shot to thrive. A few days later, we find Roland reflecting on the progress they've made so far. The old capital city has seen its fair share of turmoil, and the noble class is practically non-existent now. Taking control of this city has been much easier than Roland anticipated, especially compared to other cities. With some time on his hands, Roland decides to have a chat with Theo. Suddenly, a man rushes in with important news. A report from the north says that the Dawn army has been spotted west of Hermes. The news alarms Roland, and he quickly relays his orders. He wants the First Army to depart immediately by boat to head north. Though he sent the First Army off without delay, he is sure that they won't make it in time. So he decides to take extra precautions. We cut to the thick of the battle, where the Dawn army has burned down all the villages surrounding Hermes. The poor church followers are left hanging dead on spikes, while the surviving villagers run for their lives. With the speed of the Dawn army's march, it's clear they'll be attacking the holy city soon. One of the surviving villagers barely manages to escape the hell the Dawn army has brought to the villages beneath the mountain of Hermes. He eventually stumbles upon a few people from Neverwinter City, who are carrying out a scouting mission in the Hermes area under Roland's orders. The leader of the group is a thin guy with a mustache, though the name escapes me for now. The reason they've brought this survivor is to guide them to the bottom of the mountain without passing through the new holy city. Though the old man is reluctant to help these strangers he doesn't know, the thin mustache guy offers him a generous reward for showing them the way out. He'll receive 5 golden royals up front, and another 10 golden royals once they reach Grey Castle. If they can make it down, the thin mustache further assures him there are reinforcements waiting. With that amount of money on the line, the old man has no reason to refuse. The group finally navigates the treacherous mountain terrain, descending until evening. To the old man's shock, the First Army has already arrived. When he sees witches among them, he mistakes them for kids. His first reaction upon seeing these ladies is how the hell are these kids supposed to be the reincarnations of their warriors? The group that followed the old man, however, knows who Maggie and Lightning are, and bursts into a happy dance. Meanwhile, the old man is still trying to process everything. Then, he suddenly notices Iris, the Pearl of the North, meeting with that thin mustache guy. Iris shows him a letter, an approval letter stating that she'll be commanding these forces temporarily. Their current mission is to execute the bombing machine plan. Once all preparations are made, the battle will begin. The thin mustache guy promptly salutes his new commander, ready to carry out his duties as she sees fit. Iris reciprocates the gesture and dismisses him to get to work. As the thin mustache guy walks off, he can hardly contain his excitement to see what this bombing machine is capable of. After all, if it's called a machine, it's bound to be impressive. It looks like Lightning, Maggie, and Sister Hummingbird are the core of this bombing machine mission. We see a massive rack stacked with giant missiles, ready to be dropped from the sky. Hummingbird ensures that this heavy missile-laden frame is lightweight. Maggie's job is to carry these missiles in the sky, ensuring the missiles face downward. Once everything's set, they're ready to take off. They're absolutely certain this old holy city deserves to be demolished, along with the church followers. However, they also worry about innocent people and orphans stuck in monasteries. So, to avoid killing innocent lives, Lightning knows exactly where to drop these bombs. As they get right on top of the Dawn army, the soldiers below panic at the sight of a massive monster in the sky. They don't get a chance to figure out what's coming for them. Lightning gives the green light to Sister Hummingbird, who promptly drops 2 missiles. The tranquility of the place soon gives way to the horror of Nagasaki when the nukes hit the ground, causing massive fires to erupt right in the center of the city. Panic spreads across the city, while Lightning is having the time of her life nuking the hell out of these bastards. The soldiers are scattered and burned to a crisp as soon as the bombs drop, causing massive destruction. The bastard Dawn Army commander quickly orders a retreat, but their story ends when they're ambushed by the First Army soldiers, who had been hiding behind bushes, drilling bullets right through them. Soon, everyone trying to retreat finds themselves dead. A while later, the thin mustache guy presents the good news to Iris about the fall of the Dawn Army. The process of cleaning up the battlefield is already underway. Iris reads the reports for thorough details and learns that Apen Moya, the king of the Dawn Kingdom, is still missing. The thin mustache guy reveals that of all the bodies they found, none resembled Moya. When they interrogated the slaves, some claimed to have seen him. However, the situation was chaotic, and everyone was dressed like commoners, so no one could confirm with certainty if they had seen him in the mayhem. The last location he was allegedly seen was within the Old Holy City. Hearing this, Iris deduces that it must have been Apen Moya. To think that he disguised himself and ran away at the last moment, throwing away his dignity as a king. It may sound cowardly, but it's the wisest decision he could have made. The thin mustache guy is frustrated with himself for letting that big fish slip through their grasp. If only he'd had a team in the beginning to track the bastard down. Iris assures him that everything has actually turned out in their favor. Since everyone in the Kingdom of Dawn knows how terrifying it is to be an enemy of Grey Castle, she's sure Apen Moya will no longer feel secure on his throne. The thin mustache guy then asks what they should do next, perhaps claim the Old Holy City. Iris suggests waiting for now since Maggie is on her way to pick up an important individual. If everything goes smoothly, they should be able to take over the city without much effort. The next day opens with Isabella and Agatha flying over the Old Holy City, assisted by Maggie. As they land, Isabella steps off Maggie's back and is hit by a wave of nostalgia. It's been almost a year since she last saw this place. A soldier arrives promptly, reporting that Lady Iris has been waiting for their arrival at the tents. When Iris sees her guests, she introduces herself as a member of the advisory board and mentions that she is temporarily in charge of the Holy City's battle plans. Isabella can't help but notice Iris's blinding beauty, a maiden dressed in white, which only highlights her elegance even more. Iris hands over the battle reports. Lightning has already checked the 3 main monasteries and discovered a serious problem. The orphans within the monasteries seem to have banded together, determined to protect the buildings with their lives. Iris isn't sure how to proceed and suggests that Isabella might have some new ideas. After thinking for a moment, Isabella decides to speak to them. Later, Isabella meets one of her fellow pure witches, who uses a cube magic that can transport them anywhere. Once they arrive at their destination, Isabella instructs the transporter witch to return, leaving both Agatha and Isabella behind. Outside the orphanage, a girl spots them and blows her whistle, summoning a group of women to defend the building. But to their surprise, they are faced with Lady Isabella, who works under His Holiness. Isabella is surprised that these girls haven't forgotten her. It seems Roland's task won't be that difficult after all. The girls immediately drop their weapons and kneel before Isabella, begging her to save them. Isabella is startled by their sudden submissive behavior and quickly clarifies that she no longer holds the authority she once did. Agatha cuts her off, suggesting they focus on the mission. Isabella plays along, sternly asserting her authority with a commanding tone, asking where the judgment warriors and the priests are, since it was their responsibility to guard the place. One of the girls quickly reveals that all the personnel ran away. The girls are in a panic, speaking in conflicting statements. Isabella senses the confusion and fear they've endured, and though she feels pity, she maintains her tough exterior, silencing them and allowing only one girl to speak. The scrawny girl reveals that ever since the battle at Cold Wind Ridge, the monastery has been receiving fewer and fewer supplies. To give more context, we flash back to the past when the girls were going through starvation. With limited supplies, they had to ration their food. Things worsened when the church transferred all the judgment warriors and priests, leaving only the followers behind. One of the followers reveals that the Hermes church collapsed, and the church is still fighting for survival. To combat their enemies, the higher-ups decided to abandon the Old Holy City, with all officers being transferred back to the plains. They also left one final order. Everyone remaining in the monasteries was to fight to the death in the name of God. The newly appointed priest turned out to be a scoundrel who abused the young women. Unable to bear it, the women eventually killed him. With no choice left, they picked up weapons to defend themselves. Isabella thinks for a moment. According to what she knows, there are passages in the Old Holy City that lead directly to the Divine Hall. This city is incredibly important, so she doesn't understand why they'd abandon it so easily. She then asks the girl her name, and the girl introduces herself as Autumn. Isabella points out that if the girls stay here, they'll eventually starve without any food supplies. However, the girls insist they have nowhere else to go, having never left the monastery walls. Isabella understands that they aren't staying just because of the church's orders. They have no other options. Before she invites them to come along, Isabella wants to confirm why they consider her holiness. The girl explains that since Holiness Maine and the 3 archbishops have passed, Hermes has yet to announce a successor. According to the submission rules, Isabella is the only one worthy of the title, so the girls beg her to save them. Isabella is pleased that they see her as their last hope. This gives her an opportunity to capitalize on their confusion. With her voice raised high, she announces that she is here to deliver a very important message. The church is no longer the institution they once knew. Maine betrayed Master O'Brien, the previous pope. Greycastle is no longer their enemy. To defeat their true enemies, Master O'Brien even wished to form an alliance with Greycastle. She assures everyone that they are safe now. There will be no more near-death battles, and they don't need to guard the monastery until the very end. All they need to do now is bring order to the Holy City once again. Isabella is crafting a story that is half true to overthrow the old beliefs. She plans to reveal everything eventually. With this, His Majesty Roland will have true control over the city. Suddenly, one of the ladies' stomachs growls, catching everyone's attention with the loud noise. Isabella decides to make sure everyone is fed before they continue their discussion. All the ladies start praising Her Holiness for her generosity, which makes Isabella feel extremely awkward. After all, they can't rely on the substitution rule when it comes to passing on powers. She's merely the acting pope for now, just like before. A few young girls from the monastery come out and express their gratitude to Isabella for her kindness. Isabella can't help but notice how they thank her. Ever since becoming a pure witch, many people have hated and cursed her. But this is the first time someone has actually thanked her. This, of course, triggers something deep inside her, and she begins to understand Roland's intentions even better. We then cut to the First Army's base. There, Roland is reviewing the current reports about what's going on in the Holy City. Apparently, the ugly battle everyone expected never happened. Neither the witches nor the new cannons were used. The reason they didn't have to use any of their resources is that the church's personnel just disappeared without putting up a fight. After settling the orphans in the monastery, the army advanced further into the old Holy City, only to find all the buildings empty. A few residents remained, giving outsiders the illusion that the church was still present. However, these were just civilians from the outskirts who hadn't had time to leave. That's all the letter said. They'll have to go there in person to get more details. So Roland orders his army to continue their march toward Hermes. Eventually, he meets Isabella and Iris in the Holy City. He is actually surprised that the church has abandoned the city. This only means they've decided to protect themselves this time, hoping to rise again in the future. He finds this rather troubling. It means they'll have to keep their guard up against those maniacs forever. Isabella reassures him that the church isn't a threat anymore, confidently stating that they left a messenger behind. To the north of the city, Roland and Isabella visit a cathedral where the priest is staying. Once the priest realizes he's standing in front of the majestic Roland Wimbledon, he congratulates him on the successful subjugation of the church. He assures His Majesty that the church will no longer be Greycastle's enemy, and that this city will now be handed over to the new king. The priest also warns him about the nightmarish danger he has inherited along with the city. The dude then further gets worked up as he reveals about the danger the church had been preparing for centuries. Now that Roland has destroyed the church, it's up to him to bear the consequences. He'll be responsible for the extinction of humanity. My guy simply brushes off this over-the-top priest's assumptions. After all, he knows everything there is to know about devils, divine will, and God's smile. He knows all about the events that happened 400 years ago. Naturally, the priest is flabbergasted. The only explanation he can come up with is that Isabella told Roland everything. But Isabella honestly admits that she didn't reveal anything. He actually knows far more than anyone in the church ever did. Perhaps the church underestimated him so much that they never considered this possibility. Roland then gestures for his knight to lock the priest up in a cell. He genuinely thanks Isabella for her contribution. If it weren't for her, the Holy City wouldn't have been brought to order so quickly. The lady reveals that she used the name of the acting pope to carry out orders and control those who were abandoned. Well, she got results regardless of the methods she used, so he doesn't mind at all. He even suggests she continue acting as the pope and enjoy the privileges that come with it. For instance, she could live in fancy suites, enjoy food prepared by the best chefs, and have an abundant supply of chaos drinks. Of course, if she doesn't want any of that, she can take golden royals instead. Isabella is fine either way. In the Holy City, in a warehouse, soldiers find supplies consisting of food and weapons. Roland arrives there, and after inspecting the supplies, he notices that aside from golden royals and riches, they didn't take any supplies with them. They really did leave everything for Roland to claim, just like that priest said earlier. A soldier then reports that they've finished counting the supplies, and turns out there are over 400,000 berserk pills stacked there. He then gives them permission to destroy them all. So, The soldiers begin tossing the pills into the fire and dumping the ashes off the castle walls. Looks like Bro is finally done with the Holy City siege. Now, all that's left is to wait for Iron Axe to handle the east, and for the army to gather near the borders. Together, they'll march on the Kingdom of Dawn. With a bit more free time now, he decides to visit the Shadow Church. He brings up the idea to the witches. See, he's been dying to visit the land of illusions Isabella once mentioned. The legendary queen of Starfall City, Alice, used illusions to record the past, making it possible to pass down centuries' worth of faith and beliefs. That's also how Zero evolved from a pure witch into the Pope. Bro already mapped out the optimal route, so he's all set to go. That's when Lightning bursts into the camp, yelling about how Roland's planning such a cool adventure without her. She immediately starts begging to join. And soon enough, the other witches jump in too, pestering him about how they'd be crucial to the journey. Even Phyllis looks super eager to come along, practically begging with those puppy dog eyes of hers. Eventually, Bro gets swarmed by all the witches dying to tag along. Sometime later, the whole group heads out with him and arrives at their destination. Once inside the chamber, they find portraits of every past pope lining the hallway. This is the praying room, where all the old popes' images are hung like a gallery of holy power. Roland also notices magical stones lighting up the place, and right in the center is Lady Alice's portrait. While he's gawking at her, Isabella uses her magic to open a hidden gate behind the painting. Inside, she reveals 9 magic stone seals, each one recording major historical events. She activates the seals, and suddenly, everyone starts glowing with this strange blue energy swirling around them. Panic sets in as none of them can see each other anymore. Isabella quickly explains that the illusions from these seals directly affect the eyes. To an outsider, it looks like they've vanished, but in reality, they're all still standing exactly where they were. Nightingale sighs in relief that at least there's no danger threatening Roland's life this time. Meanwhile, the said Roland refuses to grab Nightingale's hand and instead grabs Anna's. Bold move, bro, bold move. Finally, the visuals start playing. The witches they see now are the original founders of the Federation, the extraordinary ones who survived the first battle of divine will. They also spot ancient scripts etched on discs, vows made by the 3 queens. Those vows were the foundation that helped unify the Federation. After the first battle ended, witches formed their own federation, but things were chaotic. Every novice had a different idea about leadership and how to fight the devils. Arguments dragged on for years until 3 powers rose and took control, forming a leadership system where suggestions were welcome, but the chiefs made the final decisions. These 3 cities were Starfall, Tequila, and Enleta. Their rulers were known as queens. Queen Alice led Starfall, Queen Natalia ruled Sunchaser, and Queen Eleanor was over Moon Radiance. These 3 became the last chiefs of the Federation. Then Roland notices something odd. He spots a woman who looks a lot like Garcia's master in the dream world, the one called Lan. He's seen her before. She's the same woman referred to as the chief's disciple. After that, we cut to Lorgar, who's absolutely thrilled after spotting some hybrid demonic beasts in the wild. As she's about to transform and fight, she hears rustling nearby. Even the monsters freeze up, sensing something else. Turns out 2 devils have shown up. Seeing them for the first time, Lorgar is stunned and a bit anxious. She recognizes them from Lightning's descriptions. The moment one hybrid beast lunges at the devil, but one of these gray guys easily stops the demonic beast right in its tracks. Lorgar remembers Lightning's warning that if she sees a devil, she gotta retreat immediately and report to Roland. But right now, she's torn between the 2, whether to run or fight. She steals her resolve, transforms into her beast form, and leaps straight at them. She literally overpowers both the hybrid demon and the devil by catching them off guard, even managing to rip off the devil's hand while killing the hybrid beast on the spot. The other devil quickly blows the horn to call for reinforcements, much to Lorgar's surprise. But despite the clear threat to her life, she decides she must take down these 2 devils at all costs. The devil with both hands charges at Lorgar, but she quickly dodges by sidestepping the attack. She then hits the one-handed devil hard enough to knock the crap out of him. She turns her attention toward the other devil, who still has both of his hands, and throws a strike. But much to her shock, the bastard easily stops her claws. Meanwhile, the devil whose arm she had cut off has already regrown it as though it was never amputated. And that bastard further throws a spear with some godly strength. She risks it off by turning back into her human form, and that spear directly hits the other devil over its face. She quickly jumps toward the other devil, who has finished regrowing his hand. With just her claws, she crushes his skull like it's no big deal. Suddenly, she notices a horde of monsters heading in her direction. She climbs the tallest tree, only to be horrified by the sight of an entire devil army charging toward her. We then cut to Neverwinter's port, where the ship carrying a bunch of Slumber Island witches is about to reach its destination. It had been a tiring month-long journey, but they have finally arrived. Camilla, the one in charge of this operation, doesn't seem as thrilled as the other witches. She still harbors doubts about the king. Since she doesn't have a good impression of nobles, it's natural for her to be skeptical of the third prince. The ship's captain reminds her that she too is a noble and shouldn't be judging others based on their past. As they're having this conversation, the guy in the crow's nest spots something. As they arrive, Camilla is taken by surprise when she notices a group of little girls warmly welcoming the new guests into Neverwinter. This gives the captain a chance to speak positively about Neverwinter City and convince Camilla to think otherwise. Meanwhile, Sister Scroll and Wendy are also there to welcome the new witches. While the civilians have already given the new witches a warm welcome, now it's the association's turn to represent their hospitality. As soon as Camilla and the other witches walk toward Wendy, she introduces herself as the person in charge of the new witch union and warmly welcomes all the witches here. After a while, Camilla and her fellow witches are awestruck when they see the massive apartment building they're supposed to live in. Wendy proudly reveals how this building was built specifically for the Slumber Island witches, and it wouldn't have been possible without Lotus. The witches instantly feel a sense of adoration for their fellow witches who contributed to building such a massive structure. The meat girl downplays her contribution, claiming she only assisted in the slopes for the workers. Whenever they needed to build a new floor, she would alleviate the ground for them. That way, they'd have enough space and height to work on the building. Another girl curiously asks if she's ever been looked down upon by mortals because of her identity as a witch. She responds with no. In fact, the people are so kind to her that they often share food with her. Wendy acknowledges that these new witches have come here with a lot on their minds, so it's natural for them to be skeptical about this place. After all, they have no idea about Neverwinter City's traditions. However, Wendy promises that they'll soon feel a sense of belonging here. Even if they don't join the witch union, they can still come to her. It doesn't matter whether the trouble they face is big or small. Sister Scroll flashes a thumbs up, impressed by how well Wendy has represented the witch union's hospitality, and how accommodating Neverwinter is to witches. Later, all the new witches are given a form to fill out. Though they're not interested in writing down a single detail, especially since they never intended to stay here, a few want to head east, while others have their own plans. Since there is no church hunting down the witches anymore, they're free to move wherever they desire. Then Ash walks up and points out that these witches are thinking about joining another witch association. Apparently there's a witch organization from the eastern region. Tilly assures Wendy that while the witches may have conflicting opinions about Neverwinter, they aren't evil like the Bloodfang Association. Tilly then walks up to one of the girls, Azima, who is eager to join the Eastern Association. She emphasizes the importance of sticking together for now. Although the church has been destroyed, many civilians are still extremely hostile toward witches. But Azima refuses to believe Tilly unless there's proof backing her claims. For all she knows, Tilly might be biased just because Roland Wimbledon is her older brother. It seems Azima is crossing the line a bit, which absolutely enrages Ash. She throws a deadly glare at the girl, her intense gaze practically sending daggers at her. But Azima isn't scared at all and is ready to confront Ash head-on. She throws a tantrum, accusing Tilly of using violence against her fellow witches to restrain them, just like what she did with Heidi and her group. Before things escalate further, Sister Scroll cuts through their argument, stepping in with a few questions of her own. Sister Scroll is sure that the reason these witches long to visit their hometown is because the church forced them to abandon the families who loved them so much. Now, they want to return to the families they once cherished. But the problem is that things aren't going well in the east. The lands are barren, and many people are displaced. 2 years ago, Roland introduced the refugee plan. Now there are over 100,000 people in Neverwinter City. Over 70% of them are refugees from other parts of Grey Castle. So she believes that the families these witches long to see might already be in the Grey Castle after all. She asks the girls if they can tell her the hometown they once lived in. The purple-haired witch reveals that her village doesn't have a name. If anything, people just called it 16. A while later, a woman brings in a commoner who works at the kiln. Apparently, Sister Scroll has everyone's identities memorized, and once she came to know the family tree and the name of the hometown, she was able to pinpoint the person related to that witch. Turns out, the guy is the purple-haired witch's uncle, who is flabbergasted to see his niece alive. He remembers her by the name Orchid. The witch gets teary-eyed after finally being reunited with her uncle after such a long time. While they're at it, she reveals that her name is now Doris. She then asks her uncle about the rest of her family, her parents and brother. The man's eyes well up as he reveals that they didn't make it to Neverwinter City. During their journey, they all died. Her mother kept mentioning her before she passed away. The scene fills with sorrow as the reality of the situation sinks in. The other witches begin to fear and tremble, worried their families might be long gone as well. A heavy silence follows, leaving the room filled with sorrow. But Sister Scroll interjects once again, emphasizing the importance of registering their identities. You see, if their identities are recorded, It would be easy to determine whether the families they once belonged to are alive or not. If their families are gone, they may still be able to find close relatives. So, with all that in mind, Sister Scroll stresses that these registration papers aren't just a formality, they serve a purpose. A while later, Sister Scroll and Wendy can be seen walking back to their departments together. Wendy is fascinated by how she can keep the identities of hundreds of thousands of people memorized in her mind. She wonders how Scroll manages to keep her thoughts straight with so much information in her head. Well, it looks like even Scroll doesn't know how it works. At first, she would always get headaches when she started memorizing things. But as time passed, things began to feel more organized. Almost like there's some invisible order to it all. She feels like she's omniscient, and just thinking about something triggers all the related information. While she can remember everything up until